welcome everybody. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? All right, good. I'm Ed Powers. I'm the chair of Sociology, Criminology, and Anthropology here at UCA. That's a mouthful. I'm used to saying it. What we're trying to do is really open up the doors for all of you to understand how graduate school works. I know that a few more people will be joining us later, but the way this thing is structured, you can see here in the event schedule, we have first a segment on admissions. That's how do you get into graduate school. There are a lot of tips and tricks, but also it's a lot about who you know. We've got some wonderful people here who are good to know if you're looking to get into grad school, and they will introduce themselves in a few minutes. And then we'll have a little segment on GRE prep. That's important. It's an important test. I remember taking the GRE test and thinking that was a really hard test until I took my qualifying comp for PhD, right? So it was good. And then at the end, in this last segment, I think it's going to be critical to listen to the advice of some of our former students who have gone on to graduate school, and they can give you the inside scoop of what's happening in graduate school now. So I think that this will be a really interesting part of the journey. If you hear what people are saying about their experiences, listen carefully to their advice. And these are some of our best students, and I think they have some really good advice to give. Right? Maybe even some stories about Kansas, or some stories about Missouri, or other exciting places. So, without further ado, I'd like to just start out with admissions.
My name is Wendy Lucas. I am the current chair of the history department, and before I moved into administration, I was the coordinator of the MA program in our department, and so I have been active in graduate education here a long time, talked a lot with students both thinking about coming into our program and thinking about applying to graduate school in general, and so have lots of advice from more than 15 years of trying to help students navigate this experience. So,
my name is Mike Rosnow. I accepted the baton from Dr. Lucas when she stepped away from being the coordinator of graduate studies in history. And I'm the resource in the history department. If folks have questions about applying to MA programs or PhD programs in history, I'm someone that can, along with Dr. Lucas, help you navigate the process from identifying schools to preparing application materials. I'm happy to read drafts of personal statements and talk about strategies for identifying recommenders to write those ever important letters of recommendation.
My name is Angela Barlow, and I'm Dean of the Graduate School here at the University of Central Arkansas. And I assumed this position about a year ago. And so in my role as Dean, I work with program coordinators and department chairs to support the process of moving students from I'm interested in a graduate program, what programs do you have? That's probably the first question I get, all the way through to congratulations, we've just hooded you on the stage and you're now graduated, please go and save the world. Before I came to UCA, I was on faculty at Middle Tennessee State University, and so at MTSU I was directing a PhD program in mathematics and science education, and prior to that I was on faculty at the University of Mississippi, where I was graduate coordinator for my department there. So a lot of the experience I have in terms of working directly with students in the admission process, I draw from those experiences at both Ole Miss and MTSU. But I see my role here is to answer questions, have you navigate a system that you may not be familiar with, and perhaps also help you to think about what questions to ask, because if you're like I was when I started the route of graduate education, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I'm going to help you to know what to ask.
And I'm Bill Lammers. I'm a professor of psychology and counseling here at UCA, and I've been here 28 years or so. And over that time, I've been advisor for the Psych High Honor Society, the faculty advisor for the Psychology Club, I created a unique group that I kind of headed up for many years, selecting our best psychology students who are specifically interested in getting into doctoral programs, and worked with them very intensely to do so. I've been doing workshops like this for over 25 years. The packets on the table are from me, and I can kind of walk you through some of that when we get to that point. I work with undergraduate students. I also work with graduate students, teach both kinds of classes, so kind of know the full range.
My name is Dana Steele. I'm the Assistant Dean of the Graduate School at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and I'm also the Director of Graduate Admissions. I apologize for my coughing. If it gets too much, I may step out. So, I basically oversee everything from the time a student puts their application on to the collecting of the materials in our office that the programs say that they would require to seek admissions, and then to get that out to the programs, and then back in with an admission decision. So, and then there's the other duties that I perform on supporting the Dean of the Graduate School.
I'm Mary Parker. I'm chair of the Department of Criminal Justice at UALR. We have 3 graduate programs. We have an MA in criminal justice, we have an MS in criminal justice, and we have a PhD in criminal justice. So we are very much a heavily graduate department. We also have a large undergraduate contingent, so we're an extremely busy department too. Before I took on the role of chair many years ago, I was our graduate coordinator. So most faculty who rise through the ranks into chairships or deanships, do their time in graduate education. And it's probably one of the most rewarding opportunities you ever have, because you have the chance to work with students one-on-one as opposed to 1 to 30 or 1 to 20 or 1 to 15. We'd love to have you as students, so ask questions, whatever I can do to help.
All right, so I have a question to start out. Say I'm going to apply to graduate school, and you're going to be looking at my application. What's the single thing, what's one thing that you look for in a graduate student, someone you want to select for your program? I'll open it up. You can start wherever you want.
Fire in the belly. Fire in the belly. The student doesn't have to be the smartest, doesn't have to have a 4.0. They got to have the drive. You got to see that in their application. They're willing to work hard and work as part of a team, work together with others, and they are ready to go. They're enthusiastic. That's what you want to see in a graduate student.
Effective writing. I think that we can teach you a lot about the content, about the theory, about all those kinds of things, but I can't go back to basics with you, right? I can't teach you how to do things like proofread a paper. So if you give me an application that's riddled with typos or sentences that don't make sense, I think, oh my gosh, where am I going to have to start with even to get this person to the point where they can turn in graduate level work? So I'm looking for polished writing.
And I think to bridge these two comments, don't underestimate the importance of your personal statement, because that's where these two things come together. Your personal statement is where you can showcase your drive and your passion and your desire for next level education, but don't forget it's also a writing sample. So make sure that it is as pristine as you can make it. And I know that when I was applying to graduate school, I wasn't entirely sure exactly what I wanted to do to showcase what Dr. Lammers called the fire in my belly. That's okay too, but in your personal statement, I would say fake it until you make it. Just portray that confidence that you yourself may not have yet, but show that admissions committee that you have a plan. Even if internally you think it's a 50-50 plan, it's okay in your personal statement to be a little bit more concrete than you feel yourself.
I think what I would encourage you to do is do your research on the programs that you're interested in applying to. There's nothing worse than a generic application that you can tell by looking at it has gone out to 30 or 40 other schools. Do your research and know what you're applying to, because every graduate program is different. And not every graduate program is going to be a good fit for you. And you need to know that before you get into it, because once you get into a graduate program, it's difficult, not impossible, but it's difficult to transfer into another graduate program. It's not like undergraduate, where you can just pick your hours up and take them somewhere else. There are all sorts of rules that apply when you do those kinds of transfers. So don't take it lightly. Spend some time talking to your friends, talking to your professors, talking to your parents about what would be good, graduate programs for you. Are you, do you need a program that is heavy in mentoring, where you're really working on research projects one-on-one? Are you more interested in kind of a clinical lab type situation where you're working with a group of other PhD and MA students? You need to think about those things before you make that application.
Do you think you should target maybe a faculty member? If a faculty member has some sort of research interest as an applicant, do you think?
I think you should know what your faculty are researching. I think you should know whether there are faculty there that you want to work with. I mean, do you want to do sex offender research? Well, if you do, come see us. We do a lot of sex offender research, but we don't do a lot of crime stat mapping at UALR. Can we? Yes. Do we? No. Not at this point in time. So really, if you look at the faculty who are in the department and look at what they're doing, that's going to carry a lot of weight in what you're going to be doing. So make sure, that your passion is a good fit for that academic department. When I came, and it's been a long time, I'm much older than anybody else up here, and I've been in the business much longer. When I came up for my dissertation mentor told me what my dissertation would be. And he was right. Excuse me. And I've spent the last 30 years working in that field. Did I know? Not really, but he was right. And that's how close you're going to get to your faculty and graduate programs. It's a different world than undergraduate programs. So be ready for it.
So in a similar vein, when you asked the question, what I was thinking about was an alignment between your professional goals and the program's goals. Because if you're thinking, I want to do this, and as the reviewer, as the faculty member, I'm looking at it going, our program's not going to get you there, then I'm also thinking, we're going to lose you. And so, I'll share just a short story where we had a student, this was at another university, who applied to our PhD program, had a wonderful GRE score, had wonderful letters of recommendation, had a 4.0 in her master's program, and now she's applying to our program. And so all of that looked really nice. And then I read that statement. And I read it, and the others read it, and we were concerned that there was a mismatch between who she wanted to be and who we would have been preparing. And so we denied her application. Now, y'all can imagine how shocked she was, right, because of who she was and what a wonderful student she had been. So she came and talked to me, and I said, well, honestly, I don't think that you really understand what our program is doing, what we're about, what the professional person is that we're trying to create. So I would recommend that you go talk to the faculty, and I gave the student these names of different faculty. I said, just go talk to them, ask them, what do you do? Mm-hmm. Like every day, what's your regular day look like? When you get excited about something, what is it that you're getting excited about? And talk to these different, I gave her like 3 or 4 names. And I said, if you go to those 3 or 4 people, number one, if you apply again, those people are now going to bargain on your behalf. Mm-hmm. They're going to say, well, I talked to her, and although she doesn't have a strong background in our discipline because she was switching kind of fields, man, there's so much potential after I talked with her. So they'll begin to bargain on that student's behalf. And then the other thing it does is it better prepares you to think about what it is that you want to do and whether or not that really does align with that program. Because unfortunately, I talk to a lot of graduate students who choose a program because that's what they have. So for example, maybe they live in Conway and they go, I think I want a master's. So they open up the graduate bulletin which is online. They open up the graduate bulletin and they go, let's see what they have. Well, I can do that one. And that's really not how to pick the path for your life, right? The way to pick it is to think about what it is that you want to do and who you are and where you see yourself, and then finding those available programs. And if you're living in Conway and that means traveling to Little Rock, go for it. If that means going out of state, go for it, because you people look really young and now's the time to do it. It's an investment in you and it's temporary. Right? You can always come back to Arkansas if this is where your heart is and you want to help the people of Arkansas. You always come back. But to do what you are passionate about, if that means going somewhere else, then go and love it and then come back.
The other thing about it is when you start to think about all these places you want to apply to, you'll get a list and it's expensive, okay? So, you or your parents, right? I mean, let's be real, right? Like, Mom, I need $500 so I can apply to all these grad programs, right? So it's expensive. And so don't throw money away if the program's not a right fit for you. Or one of the things I always tell students who say that they're thinking about this is, okay, so send emails to the faculty member that you think you might be interested in working with, because those emails are going to be really important. Say, here's what I'm working on. I think this aligns with what you're working on. Would you be interested in working with me on this project? If you don't get an email back, that's probably a good sign that you don't apply there, actually, because you want somebody who's going to give you feedback. And if this person can't answer your email, how much do you think you're going to get about chapter revisions and things like that, right? If you get back a, yeah, I'm working on that, maybe that's also not good, right? But if you get back, oh my gosh, that sounds like a great project. My current work is doing this thing. You should come up and we should have coffee. A couple of times I've had students who said, like, well, I'm really interested in working with this person. And we pull them up and they look like they're 107, right? And I'm like, you need to ask this person, are they thinking about retiring? Because it's a legit problem, right? Okay, because now you're there, you moved to Pittsburgh, and you get there, and 2 years later, they're like, I'm going, and you're like, but okay. So now you've got to find somebody new, right? I think that's a big difference. You hinted at it, but I think it's a very different relationship between a dissertation advisor and you as a student than what you've experienced so far. I still talk to my dissertation advisor. We've been on vacation together. He reads every single article I send out before I send it out for publication, and I've been graduated a long time now. We talk about people who've lost their dissertation advisors as being orphaned, okay? It's a different kind of an experience. And so you need to figure out, are you going to like this person? Are you going to get along? Are you going to dread every interaction you have with this human being because they're a heinous, heinous human, okay? Don't go work with somebody who's like that. And that first initial email is a beginning to try to figure out, like, okay, I like this person, right? We can communicate. Their emails have good tone, right? All this kind of stuff. Those initial emails are really, really critical. I can't tell you enough. You've got to send them. Send them. It helps you weed out the list. It also helps you try to figure out if these people are going to fit or not.
And I absolutely agree with one caveat. PhDs are not the most socially competent people in the whole wide world. So the short response may be more than they've ever written to anybody.
But if you can't interact with that, you need to know it, right? So you don't spend 7 years with this person that you're like, I don't even know. Do they hate me? Do they like my stuff? I don't know, right?
But a lot of PhDs are much more social, interactive, one-on-one than they are through email or other mechanisms. So if you have the opportunity, if it's available to you, I would encourage you to go. I would encourage you to make appointments to sit down with people. I would encourage you to be that professional that you want to be and reach out beyond just the email. That's the start. You need to know a whole lot more before you're ready to commit 3, 2, 4, 5 years of your life or a lifetime relationship, with those individuals from your graduate education. And a lot of people have that experience. My mentor is dying right now. He has brain cancer. He's 88 years old. He never retired. He just quit when the doctor said he couldn't do it anymore. So it's a long-term commitment on your part in a lot of different ways to a lot of different people, including yourself. So take it seriously.
I'd like to add one small thing to encourage you to contact potential faculty members, because sometimes things will happen behind the scenes that will have impact on your applications that have nothing to do with you. So maybe a potential PhD advisor already has 5 or 10 students, and they just can't take, you might be great, you might be the best applicant the university has ever seen, but they just simply, they don't have time to add you to their roster. And it would be much better to know that first, to save the application money up front, but also to avoid the horror of getting a rejection that actually had nothing to do with you. It just had to do with that faculty member's workload, or they're going to be on sabbatical that year, and an NEH grant the next year, and a MacArthur Genius Fellowship the next year. It's good to know that up front.
And a lot of universities are more resource driven now. And so graduate school is not open admission. The faculty has to be able to support the number of students that are working with them. So you're absolutely right. Some really high quality candidates get turned down because they start the process a little bit late, and programs have already accepted that first wave of acceptance. You may have a couple of spots left during the second wave. So that's another piece that you have to plan for. You can't decide to go to graduate school August 15th and want to start August 21st. That's probably not going to happen in this world. It might, I don't know, but probably not. So you really, it's a different kind of ball game than what you're used to undergraduate-wise.
I have a question about personal statements. I think it might be a little difficult to demonstrate your tenacity and your being highly motivated, and also maintain professionalism sometimes. So how personal is too personal for that kind of thing?
You do want to be careful. In psychology, we're kind of notorious for getting admissions or applications for our programs, and people are revealing their own psychological disorders and issues they have. And that's their motivation for going to graduate school. Just leave that out, So
that's a side thing.
Yeah. But the personal part of it, I think, is just showing the enthusiasm you have. Don't talk a lot about, I grew up and my something was abused or something, and most people have stories like that in some fashion. So, focus on your professional interests and enthusiasm for that profession, and part of that is, as we've talked about, is researching the programs and connecting that to their program. Why are you so excited about their program?
And why do you think my program's a good fit for you? Mm-hmm. But I would say demonstrate teamwork. Think of it as what you would write for a job. What are we looking for in a graduate program? That's what you want in that personal statement. You want to show us that you're a strong individual. You want to show us that you can work with teams. You want to show us that you're passionate about issues. Those are the kinds of things you want to think about. The graduate school is your job for the years that you're in graduate school. So treat it like that.
Is it a must that they, in that personal statement, mention a particular research interest? Do you think that's required?
Well, some programs ask for that specifically, like ours, because part of it has to do with personnel issues. We had an application a few years ago from a very highly qualified student who wanted to come and study Japanese history. Well, it turned out we were going to be between personnel in Japanese history, and so we ended up denying the student because we weren't going to have someone on faculty who could have worked with that student. And so for our program, at least, it's definitely an important part of the application process.
I guess I would say, I think as I look at applications, I want to know that you have some sense of the thing you want to work on, but I don't want a sentence that says, if I can't work on women in World War II, I'm going to die. That is it. That is the only thing I've ever loved. If I can't, because everybody changes. I didn't end up doing the thing that I started graduate school thinking I was going to do, right? So I think what we're looking for is, do you have some ideas, right? Do you have some sense of something you're interested in, something that you think you are interested in pursuing, maybe a topic you worked on as an undergrad that you think has some space to go on, but don't write something that says like, that's it, that's the only thing. I cannot be moved to do anything else besides this one thing, because then it's too narrow, right? And it looks like you're inflexible, and that's just part of the process, so.
I think too, and this goes back to what Mike said, follow the directions.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they provide a prompt, they provided it for a reason. And if you go off into left field, talking about something that's not related to that, that's not helping your case. So just pay very close to the attention to the question, the parameters. If they tell you a page, don't write 2 pages, that kind of thing, because they put those parameters in there for a reason, and those are important details that they want to see that you're paying attention to.
I would say it also helps distinguish your application from some others who don't do that work. If it's just a generic form letter personal statement that could be sent to 40 different departments, that stands out. It's very clear. But if you take 5 or 10 minutes and investigate the faculty that program has on staff and maybe some of their interests that might intersect with you, that kind of moves you to a different pile from the generic form personal statements.
Do they have a archive that you want to use? Do they've got resources? Is there an internship program you're interested in, right? The more you can kind of say, hey, I know you, I paid attention. These are things I've already looked at that I think are going to be a good fit that I'm interested in doing. Those send the signal to say, hey, I paid attention. So.
And also keep in mind, people like Dana at UALR, all of our graduate applications go through her office before they come to the department. So if you haven't done something, you're not going to get to us.
Right. So it's very important to look and see how it's structured. If it's like if you've got to meet the grad school requirements before you can go anywhere, then that's important to know what the graduate school requirements are. Like, is there a floor to the GPA? Did you meet that floor? If you didn't, then you're never going to go anywhere. So it's important to know if you're going to get hung somewhere and know what it is. Also research your programs. Like they're talking about statement of purposes and they're talking about reference letters and things like that. Some programs will have a form that they want or specific ways they want their reference letters turned in. Some accreditation issues have things like that. So it's important to know all the documents that you're going to need up front so that the complete file is there, and especially early on, as early as you can, get the whole complete file into the admissions office so we have time to look it over. Yeah, you met ours, go on to the program, and give them time to review you.
Because those early submissions are in competition for graduate assistantships. And graduate assistantships are awarded early, they're not awarded late.
How specific should we get with, in our personal statement about specific faculty? Should we, besides just saying I'd like to work with so-and-so, should we go beyond that, or should we talk about, do we want to focus on 1 or 2 faculty in the personal statement so much that it makes it seem like we're happy?
No, you don't. You'd hurt my feelings.
That's what I mentioned these 2, and then I don't know anyone else, and those other people are reading it.
Yeah.
Is that
But I mean, it is okay if there are a couple of people who match up with things that you're really interested in. That's a good thing. But just keep it short and simple. And you may get there and find another faculty member, that's doing something you never thought of. You never thought to do it. I've got a faculty member right now who's in BioSoc, and he does DNA samples. We've never had anybody on our faculty do DNA samples, so we had no facilities for him. So we're building a lab for him to do his work. He's not something my current graduate students ever thought they'd be interested in. But they are very interested in what he's doing since he joined us. And faculties change. People leave, they go to other places, people come in, you get new PhDs, people retire, all that kind of stuff. So point out those that are really interesting to you, but don't fixate on them.
The only exception I can think about is if you've had some contact with them, some communication with 1 or 2 people. In my case is a little unusual, but I established a communication with a particular faculty member, and essentially I was accepted into his graduate program before I even applied, which is unusual, but all, so in my letter, it was very clear, I want to work with Dr. So-and-so in his lab, and then the whole admissions committee looks to him and he says, yep, he's in. That was it. So that would be an exception.
And that's probably not the
and
norm
kind of
for
unusual.
most, yeah, a little bit.
But if you establish a real strong connection with somebody that said, I really do want you in my lab, okay, or in my program or whatever it is, then that would fit.
I think that that may be more common than we know. It depends on disciplines, and it depends on universities. And so that would be a question that you could ask to a program coordinator. So if you're interested in a particular graduate program, there's typically someone who's designated as that program coordinator or program director. And those are the people that you can ask those types of questions to. So if you are interested in history here at UCA, this would be your program coordinator, and you would reach out to him with those types of questions. Like, is it important that I talk to faculty about their work and that's identified on the front end, or does that come after the application? Those are the people to reach out and ask those questions.
And in history, it's common. We often say, I'm excited to come and work with Dr. O'Hara on print culture. And that would just be a nod, and I know what he does. That's the topic I'm interested in. I know I have an alignment with that person. But it might be different, in criminology, it might be different, right? So I think that's where if you work with a faculty member on the ground here, they're going to know that disciplinary convention stuff, and they'll be able to steer you.
We work with a number of students who are our undergrads, and obviously they have affinity for faculty, but we also pull in graduate students from across the country at all levels, and that's a different kind of ball game because you really don't know a whole lot about them. You know what their mentors are saying about them. You know what when you reach out to people who have worked with them before, but it's kind of a different, it's a different level, especially when you're looking at a PhD program. That's a high stakes, heavy mentoring type relationship between the individuals involved.
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions of the program coordinators. I think, at least when I was applying, I was intimidated by graduate school in general. And I didn't want to look like a country bumpkin to these prestigious programs that I was applying to. And so I just kind of hoped that I was doing the right thing, and that luckily I didn't get into a disastrous situation. But most program coordinators are happy to answer these questions. And if you want to cover yourself, you can always say, hey, we attended a symposium, and those coordinators said that we should ask you questions. You can kind of cover your bases that way. Put it on us.
So for letters of recommendation, who should we be thinking about asking? Because I know you guys probably get teachers, and I'm pretty sure you guys get more than that. So I'm the psych major, so I'm thinking about going to creativity of Sona. So I'm thinking about, we always get emails saying we need help to do this study. So I'm thinking about helping do study and maybe asking somebody in that field for a letter of recommendation. So do you think that's a little bit better than just going to teachers and saying we need writing a letter of recommendation?
The best letters of recommendation come from people who know you. Now, obviously, they need to be academic people. They can't be your aunt and uncle. But the best ones are the people who have knowledge of your work. I get a lot of requests for letters of recommendation, and honestly, I do my best. But for some of the students now, I don't have them anymore. But as the chair of the department, they want the letter from me, and so I will require them to send me certain things. But that's not the same as having had you in class or worked with you in a lab or been the faculty coordinator for an honors club, something that really demonstrates how you're different from the 5 other applications that program may get. The other piece of advice I have for you, and this is just purely, it is selfish, please, please, please do not ask your reference letter writers to do it in 2 days. For some reason, some people think we're sitting there waiting to write your letter, and that's the most important thing we have to do that day. Unfortunately, it's not. So again, think it through and make sure that the people that you want to write your letters have enough time to do it, because generally, those are going to be some of the busiest people in the department. And they want to write the letter, but they also need the time to be able to write the kind of letter you want them to write.
I think that also, when you think about who you're asking to write the letters, think about what it is that you want to be communicated in those letters. Because if you just say, hey, will you write me a letter, and they say yes, then we're going to get things that say, oh, she's a great student, she made an A in my class, she did her work on time, she's very thoughtful, and that way you just blend it in with every other A student that applied to the program. But if you think about the program, and maybe the program has a writing intensive portion to it, so you ask someone who you've had for class where you had to do a lot of writing, and they can speak to your ability to write, not just writing in general, but in a scholarly manner. Or, think about if you have lab skills and you'll be potentially interviewing people. So can someone speak to that particular skill? So whatever it is that program values in terms of what you're bringing in, please help your references to know and say, hey, will you write me a recommendation letter for this program? And if possible, could you focus in on this? And whatever this is, that's going to make you stand out. Because again, we get a ton of them that say, he was a great student, he made an A in my class, he came to class, he did his work, and he's going to be great in your program. So something to think about as you're asking people.
The other thing I'll say, since we're talking about this, is you might have one place that is the thing you wish you could white out and not tell anyone you whited out and fixed it, right? The one grade in one class that's not good, and it might be that was a bad semester. Maybe you got sick. Maybe there was something that made this grade in this one class bad. You might go and talk to that professor. There's a way in which letter writers can help explain some things that might be difficult to explain on your own. That person might be able to say, this person gave birth the semester that they were in that class, and so she got a B from me, but that she worked hard, and you shouldn't say that the B means that she's not good for graduate school, right? I can attest to you that her writing and all these other things. There's a way in which we can finesse some stuff, and so sometimes if you've got something that you're like, this is this one thing and I can't get rid of it, or this is, sometimes it helps if you have somebody that can kind of address that in a way in a letter and help mitigate some of that.
The other thing I would say is the earlier you think about this, the better. So hopefully some of you are not seniors applying here in a month or so, but if you're not, when you're sophomores and juniors, you want to already be thinking, there's 3 people on campus that got to know me really well and can say lots of good things about me, more than just I got good grades, I'm responsible, I'm ethical, whatever, okay, reliable, and you start fostering those 3 relationships. You start thinking about, who are these 3 people going to be? Who am I taking classes with? Who am I volunteering to research with? And you just keep fostering those 3 relationships. You keep thinking about them. You make up excuses to go visit them in their office. Just ask them some question about class. It doesn't matter what it is. Just so they get to know you as a person, and more than just that good student in class. But always be thinking, who are the 3? Who are the 3? Who are the 3? Have I talked to this person lately? Do they know? So.
No stalkers.
No stalkers.
There's a line. So
Office hours.
I think that's good. Yeah.
Office hours are good.
Going back to personal statements, when it comes to percentage of what you write in the personal statement, how much of it should be, depending on the program, of course, but how much should it be about your background and then your research experience, if that's applicable, or the part that you tailor to that program? Because sometimes people, you're saying they write their whole entire personal statement and you can send it out to multiple different places and it's not any different. How do you know what's enough for each section?
Well, you can put together a letter that has common pieces. For instance, the first paragraph could be introductory about yourself. And you could tailor for maybe the second paragraph to the institution. You don't want a personal statement that's 342 pages long. And in fact, most graduate schools have a limit on how many words you can use. So it's not like you have to create new letters for everyone. You just have to do your research so that the people reading the letter know that you're really interested in them. So, the introduction piece on you is not going to change unless you're looking at multiple disciplines. If you're looking at criminal justice and psychology and history, and you really haven't made your mind up, then you're going to have to write 3 different model letters because those are 3 different disciplines. But if you're just looking at CJ, that first piece is pretty consistent. The last piece, where you thank people for taking the time to read your materials, is pretty consistent. Personalize it with the institution's name. It's that middle part that you have to balance out. How much of it is about sports that you may have played in college that demonstrate leadership and teamwork? How much of it is about research that you've engaged in or labs that you worked in when you were in undergraduate programs? Those are the kinds of balances. It's those middle 2 or 3 paragraphs that you really need to play with. At least that's the experience that I've had.
Just be careful if you start tweaking to fix all the
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I was fixing to say that.
names, because we get them where they have the wrong institution.
Oh, yeah.
All the way read all the way through it at the bottom. Well, that's not our school. Sorry.
Could you all talk a little bit about the dreaded GRE requirements for your programs, or GPA requirements, or ballpark it a little bit for us?
Well, I can start on that. For UCA, there are graduate school requirements overall for GPA, and the graduate school minimum GPA is a 2.7 to be considered
Overall
undergraduate.
Or a 3.0 in your last 60 hours.
Yes, read the fine print. All of the provisos and asterisks, absolutely. And then it's up to each program to stipulate additional criteria. For the history department, we're looking for a 3.0 and at least 12 hours of history at the undergraduate level. And for GRE scores, we're kind of one of a dying breed here on campus where a lot of departments have done away with GRE. We think it is still valuable to helping us make these decisions and has predictive capability on who's going to struggle and who's going to succeed in the program. And for us, we look at 2 portions of the GRE more than the others. One is the analytical reading portion, kind of your vocabulary portion, and the second is the writing portion. We have a recommended minimum of 153 in the vocab portion and a recommended of a 4.0 in the writing portion.
Yeah, so a lot of our programs on campus just this past year, we turned it over to them and said, if you don't want to require the GRE, that's fine. Decide what you do want to require. So, and as I talk to different people in graduate schools in different places, that's also something that a lot of places are doing. So do pay attention to whether you actually need to take the GRE for the particular programs you're interested in. One thing that I am trying to support some of our programs and thinking about here at Central Arkansas is if you are requiring the GRE, to think of it as part of the application collection, right? So that instead of, for example, Dr. Rosenau, you just said what, a 153? So if he had somebody that applied with a 152, like I would encourage them to think about, okay, well that doesn't mean they're out completely. Let's look at what the other pieces are to their application. So trying to really think holistically about our students that are applying versus checking off each of the different pieces.
And I will say our verbiage says preferred versus required. And that's also something that I think you need to look at is like, okay, so I only have a 152. Let me look and see, does it say like, never mind, I shouldn't apply because they won't even look at it? Or does it say preferred, which means, okay, maybe I can make the case that,
And a lot of times the language will be competitive. like they won't put a certain score, they'll say your scores need to be competitive. And so then your question is, well, what does that mean? Well, it sort of means that like in the applicant pool, how competitive are you considered the other ones in the application pool? And if it's a fairly new program, they can't tell you anything. But if it's a more established program, they might can say things like, well, on average, our incoming individuals have a GRE score of a 4.0 on the writing portion or what have you. But that competitive language is actually a pretty good signal that they're considering your application holistically and rather than just looking at specific cut scores.
In psychology, we have 4 graduate programs, 2 masters and 2 doctoral. In none of the 4 programs have minimum anythings. And the graduate school, of course, has a minimum GPA, but we don't have any minimums. We do take that holistic approach. Let's look at the whole package. Some students are weak in one area, but they got strengths in another, so we kind of weigh all that. But Dr. Barlow's recommendation, and the recommendation would be contact the program director and ask them what are the kind of the mean GPA of those students who've been accepted in this program in recent years. What are the mean GRE scores of those who've been accepted in recent years? Program directors will know that kind of information, and that helps you tremendously because then you know if you're in the ballpark, right? You know if you're competitive. Of course, you want the highest GPA, the highest GRE, the higher the better, right? But that is a really difficult thing to know. Am I going to be competitive in this program? Do I have a good chance? Do I have a chance? Or is this just out of my league? It's hard to know that without knowing that kind of information. I know in psychology we have a book published by the American Psychological Association that called Graduate Study in Psychology. It actually publishes all those statistics. So you can actually look them up. So you can go look, and Dr. Park has a copy of the most recent one, so you can go to her. But it really helps you when you're looking and comparing different programs, and masters will be lower than doctoral, and but it'll have that in there, and you can determine once you have your scores, hey, I'm a really good match. I think I have a really good chance here. You know, this program, maybe I'll take a shot, but I shouldn't depend on it because it's kind of out of my league. So yeah, this is good stuff.
Oh, do you want to talk about graduate school?
Well, at our graduate school, our floor is a 2.7, and then we have last 60 would be 3.0. We do have some cases where we'll let them come in on like a special condition, but the program would have had to have gone through a review and through the grad council and been approved on these special things that they, if you didn't make the 2.7, but maybe they'll accept you to a 2.5, what are you going to display for them that is going to convince them that you just had some hard times with your grades, but they're going to allow you in? So there has to be some supplemental information you have to turn in, whether it's resumes or statement of purposes or writing samples or something like that. We have a few programs that do that. So it's good to know your programs, what their admissions are and what the levels of admission, like regular, or is it conditional, is it the special condition because you didn't meet the floor? So that's important. And so at the grad school, we make sure that happens, and we make sure that international applicants have turned in what they need to like the language and things like that. And then we collect everything that a program said, I need this, this, and this for the review, and we collect it, and then we send it on for the experts to review.
Our threshold is 2.75. We look between 2.75 and 3 point in the last 60 hours. We made a conscious decision to do away with the GRE, or the Miller's Analogy, for our MA and our MS program. We're at a pilot this year to see if it positively or negatively impacts the quality of students that we're getting into the program. We're most interested in your undergraduate career and your ability to write and think critically. Those are the things that are most critical to us. Now, we have an accelerated MA PhD program where you start the MA, you're an MA student the first year. The second year you apply to the PhD program. At that point, you would have to take the GRE for the PhD program. And then at the end of the second year, you get your MA, but you continue on for your PhD. So it cuts off about a year for you if, in fact, you're one of those students that's chosen for that program. I know a lot of programs in our field have done away with GRE. They don't see it as something that has predictive value for them. It may have in history that we just don't see in our field. So we're really interested in strong writers, in individuals who have creative ideas, and individuals who have a really strong interest in engaging in research.
Dana said something that I wanted to come back to, and that's different types of admission. And so she said, we have full or regular admission, and then we have conditional. So I just want y'all to be aware that there are programs that will admit students conditionally, and usually the condition will be you have to do something like make a 3.0 in your first 9 hours or something like that. But if you're on a conditional admission, you're not eligible for financial aid. So if you're relying on financial aid, just be aware of that. And then, at least here at UCA, if you are on a graduate assistantship, you're not eligible for a graduate assistantship if you're a conditional admit. So it's really important that you think about that and what is it that you're going to need once you start, and whether conditional admission would allow you to do that. Of course, y'all look like bright people, and y'all are here tonight, so I'm expecting y'all to be like fully admitted folks, but just an FYI, because you did say that.
And I'd also like to add a piece about the GRE or other assessment mechanisms that admissions committees use when they're evaluating applications, and that has to do with funding opportunities at a graduate program. When an admissions committee is looking at all of these applications of stellar students, they may have only 5 graduate assistantships available, but 10 4.0 students, or 3 teaching assistantships available, but 25 people who have glorious writing samples. And so these admissions committees have to develop some sort of criteria on how to distinguish who's going to get that coveted funding package that, if you do it right, will hopefully pay for your MA PhD program so that you don't have to go into debt. And as you're asking questions of the programs, those are crucial questions to ask about the relationship between your admissions package and the elements that you're submitting to those funding decisions. Not just, yes, come to our university, but yes, come to our university and we're going to give you money and these opportunities to help you live while you're enriching our university environment.
And really, before you embark on graduate school, be ready for it. I mean, it can be consuming. I know people who have divorced in graduate school. I know people who have affairs in graduate school. It's much more intense than anything that you experience as an undergraduate. And for some people, it's too much at that point in their life. The key to education is it's going to be there when you're ready for it. Be ready for graduate school. Because you certainly don't want to put yourself in a position where you walk away and you have a slew of Fs in your last semester, and 10 years later you're ready, and you come back and it's really, really difficult for you to get back into the graduate school, right? So that's kind of the other side of it. Know your program, but also know yourself. Know if you need to spend some time out working before you take this on. Know what you want to accomplish. Know where you want to be in 8, 10 years. Know what you want to be doing. Know what your family situation is. Are you and your husband trying to have a baby? Are your parents getting older and that's going to be a responsibility that you're going to have to take on? Know those things before you decide that this is the path you want to take, because it's really, really hard in graduate school to balance life sometimes.
I want to circle back one more time to something that Dr. Rosna said earlier. I think you shouldn't be afraid to ask questions. And I think you need to ask things like, what's the track record on your graduates getting jobs, right? I mean, you don't want to have done this and get no job, okay? So, ask, hey, what's going on? Are you being successful in placing your graduate students? You could end up at a really big prestigious university. That's great. Ask how many students are currently working under the person that you're going to work with. Are they going to take on 2 students at the same time. Because I'll tell you what, you're going to be on the job market at the same time. Your dissertation advisor is going to be writing letters. You're all applying for the same jobs, right? We do the same thing. We're out on the market at the same time. Our dissertation advisor has to write letters.
And we're both great.
And we're both great, right? So, but there's going to be they're going to get a letter. Clearly, they're going to write one over the other, right? And so you need to know where are you going to rank in that, right? Does this person have 10 students and you're the baby? Okay, that's great, and the rest are all going to be gone by the time you get. Does the person have 3? Don't discount some programs just because they're not as prestigious, because they might have prestigious faculty there. And so my degree is from the University of California at Riverside. It's not the campus that's most well known, but I worked under somebody who kicks ass, okay? And so when he sends letters of recommendation for me, the name says a lot. It didn't matter what the letterhead said because his name spoke volumes. And so don't discount somebody at a campus. If there's a perfect person that does exactly what you want to do, but maybe they're at, I don't know, Pittsburgh State or something, and you're like, oh, who even knows about this? Don't let that discount your going there. If they're the perfect person and they are the number one person in the area that you are interested in working in, go and do that, right? That's going to be worth it as well.
And don't discount programs that have a lot of new faculty, because those are your up-and-comers. Those are the people who will put you in their articles, and you'll really have contributed to their articles. Those are the people that will put you first on the article, whereas a lot of my peers will claim first author, and they'll put the students afterwards, but they didn't do anything. So, pay attention. If you've got some good, strong assistant professors who are in their 3rd, 4th year, they're coming up for tenure at 6, they're incredibly active. And they're going to want you to join their team. Whereas you look at somebody like me who's been a professor for a zillion years, I'm kind of tired, I'll admit, I like to work with students, but sometimes I get tired and I want to break for a semester. So I may not be the best person for you to set your research agenda around. But there are a lot of good people out there who are in that mid-range who are going to be the movers and shakers in 5 years, 10 years, 12 years. They're going to be the ones who can help you get where you want to go.
All right, well, thank you. And so we have a panel of people here who are going to talk a little bit about GRE prep. And so I'll just start out with the questions, and then we'll see how this goes. But I'll ask you, how do you prepare for a test like the GRE?
I'll start. I think I got invited to be on this panel because I was one of the people, like I had mentioned to some other students, that the first time I took my GRE was a very humbling experience. I didn't do very well. And then on the old scoring system, I raised it like hundreds of points by studying. So don't let anybody tell you that you can't study for this test and improve your score. So if you get a discouraging score, don't give up. There's a lot you can do. But I would say one of the biggest tips I can give you is you guys are all probably pretty ambitious, and you probably, you're wanting to go to graduate school, so you probably have a lot that's going on, so you're probably really busy. So you need to figure out ways to be more efficient with your time. So like one of the biggest tips I can give you is study your GRE words during when you're in the car. So listen to a podcast, do it while you're getting ready in the morning for, to work or go to school. Do it while you're cleaning, do it while you're eating. You have to be able to kind of multitask, and especially those words, since that's something you can kind of listen to on a podcast or something like that. That is just a way to create more study time for you. So that's one thing I can say. Yeah.
Along those same lines, if you have time off school, that is an excellent time to schedule the test and prepare for it, because it's easy to say, to schedule it for some time during the semester and think like, oh, I can put aside an hour or two a day to prepare and study, but that's a different story in practice. I definitely fell into that trap where I just, I stopped prioritizing my study time, and suddenly the test was a week away, and I was like, oh gosh, it's not something you can cram for, let's just say that. So you want to spend a lot of time building up your math skills, familiarizing yourself with vocabulary. It's not just something you can figure out a week from test.
I think too, there's probably resources on campus where they'll run workshops, GRE preparation workshops and things like that. If you ask me who's doing them right now, I don't know, which that's not a good answer. So you could ask me later and I could find out for you. But those workshops are helpful for a couple of reasons. One, it puts you on a schedule to go ahead and get started in it. So if you're very busy and all, it makes you go. And then two, a lot of times in those types of workshops, they'll give you like practice tests. And so that gives you a way to gauge where you are and how much more effort you need to like work on it to improve and so forth. So GRE workshops are a pretty standard piece on university campuses, and you should be taking advantage of those.
Yeah, I think that you want to get started early. I think that was sort of like one of your points there, right? It's like maybe like the summer before your senior year, be thinking about like maybe take a few months during the spring semester, try to study for it, and then take the GRE for the first time maybe during the summer, right, before the fall semester. That way, if you don't do well, you can always take the GRE again, right? And definitely study for it. Study for it before you take it the first time, because I don't think it's something people really want to go through twice, to be perfectly honest with you. It wasn't enjoyable. And I think just to your point about like, how do you study? I brought props. So like I bought these sort of books, right, that sort of like Cracking the New GRE 2012, Barron's Essential Words, right, I'm a history professor here at the University of Alabama, or here at the University of Central Arkansas. So like it was all about the verbal score, right, in my field. And so you can really improve your score just by sort of like studying. For me, it was like I actually went to school here in undergrad at the University of Central Arkansas, and I actually worked at the McDonald's on Salem as a department manager. And I was there like 60 hours a week. And so like when do you have time to study between that and school? Well, I got a break usually for like 30 minutes, right? And so when I was eating, I had this book out, which is probably why it looks so bad. And I was going through, right, looking at the words and trying to memorize the words and think about the words. And then I guess like maybe one last piece of advice is all of you are going to be reading tons of books as undergraduates, I assume, if you're in the humanities. Anytime you come across a word that you don't know, or don't just skip it. So as an undergrad, like I was really bad. I would just like kind of, okay, I get the context, and I just and I kind of knew what the word meant, but I didn't really know what the word meant. If you just look those up as you go, you'll be surprised at how much you'll build your vocabulary. And then when it comes time to like prep for the GRE, you'll already have a strong vocabulary, which I'm sure all of you probably have a pretty strong vocabulary anyways, but that's just sort of one of the tips I would recommend.
Kind of looking at his books too. So say you don't have the money to buy the books, because I already know you have to spend money on the GRE. If you go to the Faulkner County Library, it's free to check out. It's free to get a card, and it's free to check out the books as long as you get them back on time, because they will charge you late fees. But I definitely got GRE books from the Faulkner County Library. They have like GRE for Dummies, and it's so helpful. And they have practice tests in the back of the book, so that helps. But I would say if you're going to take a practice test, go on ets.gov, because something that's not as well known, I think, about the GRE is that so there's analytical writing, and then it's a verbal and quantitative, and then is it verbal? It's verbal, and then it's something random or something like
There'll
that.
There'll be an experimental test that won't necessarily be scored, but you'll have no idea which is experimental, so you have to do your best on all of them.
Yes, but the thing about those last two is that they make it harder depending on how you performed on the first half. So like the first, verbal and quantitative. Say you did kind of bad on both of those, the next two ones are going to be easier for you. Or if you do really well on the verbal and quant the first time, then the second time you go through those sections, it's going to be really hard. And because they're trying to see where you score, and you're competing now with that higher bracket of people. And the ETS website, their test does do that same program where it's harder the second time you take it if you do well on the first half. So I do think that's the best kind of practice you can get for the actual GRE test.
And Dr. Park might speak to this better, but the timed element of the online practice test can be super helpful if you're not used to that, because it can be, I don't know for sure, I think it's 20 minutes for 30 questions or something very similar to that. So you have less than a minute per question on some things. So you need to get in the habit of working through things as quickly and efficiently as possible.
And this, oh no, I was just going to say, and it's good to start, even if you don't want to start timed, you could start untimed and see how long it takes you then switch to the timed and see how you perform after warming yourself up to it, because you don't have to go from 0 to 100. It's okay to take your time.
So I made like a big long list of GRE prep tips that's on the thing for you guys. And if I had one tip that I could give y'all out of all of this, it's like the most important thing that I think really raised my score. So there's like these lists of high frequency GRE words. You need to be smart about how you use those. So do not start with a really long list. And here's why. Start with a 52 word list or a short GRE word list, because those are going to be the most likely to occur. So if you run out of time, you at least have gotten the top 50 that are most likely to occur. Then once you've learned those, then you can think about moving on to a 100 word list, okay? And then once you've learned those, you can think about moving on to a 300 word list. But it's best to start with a short word list because those are the top most likely to occur. And if you move on to the others, a lot of the ones from the previous list will pop up on that list too. I know that really helped me a lot because I recognized on one of the tests that I took that like at least 4 of the words from that 52 word list occurred, and 4 questions out of like 20, that's a lot to help you. So yeah, that little tidbit, I really would suggest using that. So.
I wonder, when I took it, apps were not like, and I'm not that old, apps weren't a really big thing in terms of like GRE prep, but since then I've heard that like there are now apps that are available that are actually adaptive. So like things that you're not doing well on, it'll actually like track those things and give you sort of a sense of like, these are the concepts you need to study more in terms of like the quant section, or these are the types of words, the section of words that you need to study more. I wouldn't substitute the app in exchange for like the books necessarily or these other strategies, but sort of like an addition. I mean, we're always on our phones, right? We always have it with us. So if you're sitting there waiting for class, 10 minutes each day for an entire semester, spring semester, could add up to, you not actually having to take time out of your day to explicit time to study, right? So just something to think about as well. I don't know if either one of you all use the app or not.
There is an app I know of, also a website called Magoosh, and there are free resources on it. You do have the option to buy a 1-month trial or a 6-month trial, and I didn't do that, so I can't say but I've heard from other people that it really helped them because you can use it on your phone, so it is really convenient. Did you have a question?
Just to add, I use the Magoosh free app that they have that's for vocabulary, and it puts it in sets, so it gives you a 20-word list, and you have to match and remember what they're talking about, and if you fail it, then you don't get to keep moving forward, so it gives you like, oh, you finally got 20, now you can move on to the next set, because you've learned those words, and it'll bring back old words that you originally learned in future sets to test you to see if you actually retain that. That one is free.
Yeah, I think they're great resources out there, and there's probably a lot more than that too. So it'd be worth checking out. But I used online resources, and I used the Barron's book, which I thought was super helpful. So you definitely want to explore as many resources as possible and see what your specific learning style requires.
Study in a smart way, like with the words and stuff. Like, it's so much better if you can take a word and apply some personal meaning to it. You're like, study smart. Don't do it because you don't have a lot of time, so you have to be very efficient and smart with the time that you do have. So like, I remember like one word, like I like applied that to like people that I knew in high school, like that really fit them and stuff. So like, whatever you can do to kind of make it personal so it's more memorable for you.
What about
So I'm getting ready to take the GRE. I've got a little anxiety because I've never seen this test before. Can you help us reduce anxiety a little bit about it by helping us understand what the test, what's going to look like when we go take the test, what it's going to feel like, what the experience is like? What can you tell us?
I think that the best thing you can do is take the advice of, I don't remember who said it, but go online to the ETS and take the practice test. It's basically the same exam, right? It's just in the comfort of your own home, and definitely take it in sort of the same type of atmosphere that you would take it in the testing site. That way you've already gone through this 3 or 4 times. You know how you're doing. And then I would say, like, cut off studying like 3 to 4 days beforehand. I don't know, maybe that's too early for some people. And then just like hang out with friends, watch a movie, chill, relax, go to sleep, eat breakfast, go and enjoy it. Well, do the best you can, right? Like, that would be my advice.
Because it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like at that point, it is what it is. And so you just go in there and do it. Don't worry about it.
Our education system has prepared us really well to take standardized tests, and I was super nervous going into the GRE the first time, and then I actually relaxed once I started taking it because it was familiar, responding to the questions. It was stuff, it was difficult, but it was a structure I was familiar with from high school, so don't be intimidated by that sense and try not to feel nervous. It's not the end of the world if you do bad. You can retake it. And then the previous panel talked about it too. If your scores are a little below where your program wanted them to be, they'll take other things into consideration. So it's not the end-all, be-all of your graduate school application.
I had to, so I'm like a turtle. I'm slow as Christmas. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but that was one of the reasons I didn't do well the first time I took it. I felt like I was just getting started and the time was like already up. So I had to get really, really comfortable with that time element. So I can't emphasize enough taking those practice tests because that's going to do so many things. It's going to familiarize you where all the buttons are, so you don't have to worry about that. It's going to familiarize you with the instructions, so you don't have to read those every single time. That's wasting valuable time, It's just making it feel like second nature. And also I had to practice breathing while I took my practice test because I would notice that I was just kind of really these very shallow breaths, and I needed to practice relaxing while I took the test so that I could actually focus. And the more you practice breathing and relaxing when you actually do the practice test, the more likely you're going to remember to do that during the actual test when the stakes are a little bit higher. So I actually put notes on my scratch paper during the test that said breathe, remember to take a breath, because it gives oxygen to your brain so you can think better. But that's just one thing that I had to do. I had to practice relaxation strategies while I did the practice test so that I would remember those relaxation strategies when I did the actual test.
So everything else is kind of standardized, so vocabulary and math is standardized, but the writing is where you're flexible, so you guys have any tips on when it comes to the writing section about making sure that you're doing everything with the non-standardized core?
There is no spell check. So you're going to want to reserve time to reread your work and find typos, because it'll happen. It's, we're not infallible. But what really helped me was these practice books. They'll tell you what kinds of questions they're going to ask you. There's 2 kinds of writing prompts, and they'll give you examples of all the different kinds. So really you can take a formula type approach to it, and you can say, I need to make sure I cover these bases when I'm answering this prompt. And if you can keep those things in mind, you won't stress, you won't waste time trying to think of the right things to say. And if you need to start in the middle of whatever you're trying to write about, do that, and then go back and write your thesis statement. It's better to get your points across.
I would say use the scratch paper to outline what you're going to write as you're reading even the prompt for it, because a lot of times your best ideas come in while you have that in front of you and you're reading it for the first time and you're like, oh, I'm going to write about this, I'm going to write about this. But by the time you get through the whole entire prompt, you forget all the stuff that you were going to write. And I would suggest noting that as you're going through the prompt, that way you don't forget those points. And even when you're like typing your paper, you might know, oh, this is the perfect thesis statement, and I'm going to say this after I get done with that. And then you get done with the thesis statement, and you forget that point that you were going to make after that. Definitely like write your thoughts down as you're going through the prompt, because it's very helpful. Also read a bunch of practice prompts, because there are a bunch of them. I mean, like all of the past ones from the past GRE tests are on the ETS website. There's so many on there. You'll have so many prompts you can practice right. You'll not run out. There's a bunch of resources on the ETS website. Definitely like advocate using that to practice. And the practice test on the ETS website also lets you go through the writing portion timed, and that helps too.
I also would suggest that you take the test strategies and tactics very seriously, because you're not going to know the answer to every single question, especially if you're getting like harder questions because you're doing well. So you're going to have to become a good guesser. And those test strategies, those test tactics that a lot of the books go over, they teach you ways to make really good guesses. And they also teach you ways to be faster. So don't underestimate the power of those tactics. A lot of the tactics that they teach you are things that you wouldn't necessarily, they're counterintuitive, you wouldn't necessarily know. So you probably all think, use a calculator, that's going to make me faster on the math. But actually, there's a lot of tactics that you can learn that a lot of these books will teach you that are quicker than using the calculator. So that's not something you would necessarily like think unless you actually took the time to look at those tactics. So they really are helpful. It's not just obvious stuff.
Yeah. So and I think the thing the mechanism I use to kind of at least for like the verbal part and the quant part was like, if it's getting harder, that's a good thing. It must mean I'm doing well. Like that's what I kept telling myself. So no reason to stress. As far as like the writing, I think that using the things that you all said are very good tips. At the end of the day, I think most of us in the humanities have done a lot of writing, and a lot of us, at least in history, I don't know who all is here, like you have to write in-class essays all the time. And so I didn't feel like the preparation for that was necessarily as difficult, and I hope that that's the experience that you guys have as well, is that coming from the humanities, the writing portion, the analytical writing portion it was the easy part of the exam. From my point of view, like it was the part where the answers aren't there, they're here, right? And I get to just put them down on the paper and create something that I'm proud of by the end of it. And I really enjoyed that part of the exam. I thought it was the easiest part of the exam. I thought it was super enjoyable, and that's also the part I did the best on. But I think the things that you all mentioned are really important as well. Like go in there, look at the previous prompts so you have a sense of like what type of questions you could potentially be asked. And once again, right, take the pre-tests and look at the tactics and the tips, and once you get in there, just perform, right?
I think he brings up a good point too when it comes to the writing. Like you asked about it because we're focusing so much on the verbal and the quantitative, but take that as a good sign because we're talking about the harder part of the test. It's because the writing part is kind of the easier part of the test. It's coming from you and analyzing the prompt, of course, but that's like something we've been trained since childhood. And even if your writing skills aren't the best, there's a trick. It's in the GRE for Dummies, and I can't remember exactly what each point was, but they said your answers don't even have to be right. Like, there's no right or wrong answer as long as you're addressing this question as you're filling out the analytical writing part, you're going to get the points. So even if you write something dumb, if there's such a thing, you're going to get the points as long as it answers the question.
Answering the question is the most important thing. Like, just reading the prompt carefully and making sure you address all parts of it. They're not trying to trick you, but it's easy to go off on a tangent when you're free writing, so make sure you answer the question they ask.
How long should you prepare to study for this year? Is there an optimal length of time?
Defer. I would try to start as early as you can, but I know people that if they kind of doubled down, they were able to really pull off a really good score in a month. They had to really kind of rearrange their schedules to do that though. So I think, at the if you can start early, great, but if not, at least 3 months is what I would suggest. I know that that's not going to be everybody. That's not going to happen for everybody. But if you only have like a month left, you may have to do some rearranging of your schedule and stuff to kind of prep for it.
It seems like, just listening to y'all talk, that in a lot of ways your schooling has prepared you to take the test, right? You've been writing, you've taken a lot of tests. You young whippersnappers have taken a lot of tests in your days. So you've got some basic test-taking skills. And so forth. And so a question like that really comes down to you, the individual. And so maybe thinking about taking the practice test and doing those things to see where you are at this moment. And that's something you can go and do today, right? You just go do it. And see where you stand. And you may find out that you've got a lot of work ahead of you to get ready, because I'm a math educator. So the word piece for me was not my strong suit. And so if I had waited until a month, I wouldn't be here today. But but the math part, like, I was right there, so I didn't have to do anything to prepare for that. So I think it's really individual, and rather than just take a shot in the dark and say, well, I don't have time right now, so I'll wait another month. Kind of how I think about exercising. I'll wait another month to get started on that. Go ahead and take that practice test. Get your baseline, see where you are, and then be very strategic about where you need to work to improve so that you're using your time wisely.
I'm a huge fan of deadlines, so self-imposed deadlines, and so I think that the 3 months sounds really reasonable. You can't, in my view, you can't sustain hard studying on something that's in the future for more than 3 months. My MA, my PhD comps, I studied 3 months. I saw people put that off forever and a day, and then they never took the exam, right? Because the exam became this daunting thing that they didn't think they could do. I've seen people do that with the GRE too. They just keep pushing it. And at a certain point, I think that maybe March is a good sort of time to start. Maybe obviously you can be doing stuff before then, the stuff that we sort of talked about, insofar as looking up words and trying to be really diligent in school and whatnot. But maybe in March or so, you start to say, okay, I'm going to set aside X amount of time. You create a schedule and you say, I'm going to take the exam. March, April, May, June, sometime in June, right? And you say, this is my goal. And then you take a pretest maybe the month before, 2 months in, and say, am I close to where I want to be? And if the answer is yes, go ahead and schedule the exam. Go ahead and schedule it, all right? And then that at least for me, having that deadline pushed me and almost throughout graduate school and also on the GRE stuff to kind of push to the finish line. And hopefully May to June you have some time, a little more time, to sort of really focus on the GRE. I hope that's not bad advice.
No, I think it's sound. I was thinking that the deadline thing really does help, because I started studying for the GRE 6 months before I ended up actually taking it. But I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to take it the next month. And then it gets to the next month, I'm like, oh, not quite there. Okay, next month, maybe 2 months. And then it goes, and I didn't set a date. And then that was torture, because I get close to the time I was thinking I was going to take it. I'm like, I'm so unprepared. This is not going to be successful. And don't put yourself through that. Definitely have a mental date that you're planning for and try to stick to it. Like he was saying, if you get close, 2 months in, you take a practice test and you're nowhere near where you want to be, then you can move the date. But as long as you have a date in mind, then I think it's good, because you know where you're planning for, and it's hard to commit to something when you don't actually commit to something. Not to sound repetitive, but yeah.
I scheduled mine before I started studying, so that definitely, I wasn't thinking about it, but I think I did give myself 3 months to prepare for it, because I think I scheduled it at the beginning of spring semester and took it right near the end, so it's about the right amount of time. And I didn't feel overwhelmed by my studying habits. It didn't consume me, so I think it was, it's doable in the 3 months.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I just want to say something just generally about the GRE. The GRE will not get you into grad school, but it will keep you out. Okay, that's from what everybody sort of tells me. Like you have a great GRE score, that's wonderful. No one's ever going to ask you about it again. Okay, like nobody's going to talk to you about it in grad school. No one wants to know. Nobody ever wants to remember that we did this. Like it's just you have to meet sort of like the minimal, right? You have to meet the minimal to get into the programs that you want to get into, and so you should probably look and see what that score is before you start sort of preparing for the GRE to give yourself a sense of like my goal is, and I'm not up on like this score. My goal is like, was it like 150 or whatever, 160, whatever the sort of goal is. This is my target zone for the school that I want to get into, and have that sense of sort of where you want to score. But at the end of the day, it's all these other things. The GRE is sort of just like, did you get through that door? They will shut the door in your face if you don't get up to that point, but that's not going to sort of like make or break your application once you've met the minimal threshold, if that makes sense. So you don't have to score perfect, right? There's one student in grad school who's like, I had like almost a perfect score. And it's like, nobody cares. Like no, absolutely nobody cares. That's probably not why you got in. You probably got in because you had great writing and letters and other things like that, in addition to your beautiful GRE score that you're proud of.
Speaking of that, all of that information should be available to you on whatever department you're applying to on their program's webpage. It should be under like something like student admissions and outcome data, and there's lots of other information on there too, but that's where you can find like the percentiles that they typically accept. And you do want to know those things going in, because you want to have target scores, and you want to know how far below and above that you can be and feel comfortable. So I would recommend looking at it.
So somebody mentioned taking a diagnostic test and taking like an initial test when you get ready to start studying. So I would kind of think about like if you're the type of person that gets very discouraged easily, if you are that type of person, then I would suggest studying a little bit before you take the first test, because if you don't, you might end up with a really low score, and then you might be so like discouraged that you kind of like it puts a lot of like this anxious cloud over the whole study session. So, kind of think about who you are. Like, am I the type of person that won't really discourage me? But, if you are that type of person, then I would suggest studying a little bit before you take the first diagnostic test, so that you're able to kind of start somewhere that's pretty good and not be like, I'm probably making myself sound so anxious. Sorry.
Oh, did you finish what you were
I was just saying I'm probably making myself sound like a basket case when I'm just
It's relatable.
I was going to say something that's not also well known about the GRE is now it's not just 3 months that you can take it, or like 3 times you can take it. You can basically take it whenever you want to. And all the dates are on the ETS. They'll show a little calendar. You just pick the date and the location you want to take it at, and you just have to make sure to show up. And it helps anybody to know like the environment that you take it in. I don't know, do they still do it in the Kirkpatrick Plaza? Okay, yeah. So it's in Little Rock that you take it if you take it in this area. And it's upstairs in the building, and they do check like your bag, or they keep your bag out, and they give you a locker to put your stuff into. I'd recommend bringing a lunch or something, and then kind of like she was saying, breathe on your paper as you're in the room, because when you're in the room, it's like you have pencils and you have your paper, and that's it, and you're in a little cubicle. And I thought it was kind of pleasant because they gave you earphones that you can put over to muffle all the extra sounds, and that helped me to focus. And especially when you breathe, it's kind of like a calming feeling, and I don't know if that helps to know that stuff is in there. And you do get like, I don't know if it's 15 minutes or whatever the break is.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. But you can go out there and also just center yourself while you're eating apples or something, something like that. Just take something that's comforting, or a banana, because those are supposed to be good for stress.
Yeah, I actually hadn't ever been to the location prior to taking the GRE, and I only took the GRE once, but I was like running late and there was traffic and I was stressed. So like when I got to the GRE test site, I was like, all right, I have to decompress, because I had never been to the location before. So I actually recommend that like drive to the location, know where the location's at, have a sense of what the traffic's going to be like to Little Rock in the morning. It's bad. So like have a sense of how long it's going to take you. You would rather be early, 30 or 40 minutes, and sit in your car and sort of like just listen to whatever music you like or whatever, rather than be like I was sort of like 5 minutes before the exam, showing up in the parking lot, like thinking I was going to be late, right? And then sort of like running in, and then it's like the National Archives where they hand you a key and you like open it up and throw your stuff in, and it's like, what is going on here? Yeah, I definitely recommend showing up to the site beforehand. I think all those things you said are good as far as like, bring something that's sort of like comforting.
Yes. And definitely knowing the building helps.
Yeah.
It was very confusing.
I might have been the same location.
Yeah, I see you're talking about how expensive it is. Yeah, if you can take it one time, that's ideal. It's too. If you can take it once.
There's also a voucher program at the University of at UCH where the first time you take it, I believe it's if you get any kind of financial aid from the university, you get a half off voucher. It's either half off. It was here 3 years ago when I took it, and I only had to pay $80 to take the GRE.
Although I was thinking it was not there whenever I took it, so I was double.
I'll be honest.
It was magically gone. So I don't know if they have brought it back or if there was something.
And it could be an aid thing.
Yeah, it depends. It might depend on what kind of aid you receive, and so.
It is about what, $205 now each time you take it, and
applying to grad school on top of it.
Yeah, so it gets expensive quick. Yeah.
Oh, it's $30.
Four is free lunch, and then every extra is $15.
So it's actually 5 free now, and it's $30 to send your score, actually, which sucks. So definitely have an idea of where you want those scores to go.
Yes. And can't you, if you take it and you just feel like went really, really awful, you can not have the scores. You can opt to not have the scores show up on your record. So, that can be a kind of a nice thing for people to remember. If this doesn't go, if you're freaking out and it's not going well, remember that you do have that option. And a lot of people go in the first test and they do really, really well, but I just want y'all to know that for those of you that go, because it may happen for some of you and it doesn't go like you want it to, lots of people recover from that. I know lots of people who have recovered from that. I'm one of those, and I know lots of other people that have recovered that. I'm just a really slow test taker, and I don't like time. Princess doesn't like to be rushed, so.
I took it twice, because the first time my writing score, I didn't write enough. And so it was really, really poor, and I knew writing score was going to be the most important thing for my program that I was applying for. And so I didn't send the scores, and I studied again for 2 months, got somebody who, understood math more than I did to help me with my math section, and it shot up. So sometimes it might be twice, but if you really think it's worth it, you should do this.
One more thing I want to mention. Aisha talked about you can take it as many times in the year as you want. I think
yes.
I think that is true, but keep in mind that I think you have to wait 21 days between tests. So if you are trying to take it in your fall semester and application deadlines are December 1st, you're going to want to, if you're trying to get a certain score and you didn't do it the first time, you need to have enough time to take the test and get your score reports in. So you can't take it, November 14th and just cross your fingers that they get in before December 1st. You don't want that stress on you anyway. So keep that in mind.
And after you take the test, this is also something that's not very talked about, because you can take a standardized test and then you have to wait months before you find out what your score is. But after you take the GRE, they give you a projected score after you take it. So you kind of know where to go from there. And you can plan ahead for the 21 days that she's talking about in case you didn't get quite as high as you want. But it could change, possibly.
In my experience, the projected scores were the exact scores. I don't know if they've changed for other people, but that's a really good thing to go off of. They're pretty much going to be right. You don't get your writing score, but you will get the other 2 scores.
Are there trends in graduate schools away from GRE? You have to have the GRE in the zoo.
I think there are places that would take the Miller's analogy test instead, or like they were talking about earlier, looking at the whole package, that it wasn't as, I mean, it's important to have a score, it's good to score and do your best, but it wasn't like make or break you kind of thing, is my understanding of it.
I can tell you that in this state of Arkansas, like within, say, 2 months ago, the graduate deans from the different universities came together, and that was one of the topics. And just about everybody in the room was saying if the graduate schools were moving away from it and then putting it on the programs to decide. And so then you're looking at instances where probably PhD programs are requiring it, probably highly competitive programs are going to require it. So for example, here on this campus, we've got the DPT program, physical therapy, where they have 400 people apply to get in 60 seats. So they're going to have the GRE because it's one of those pieces that they can use to help. That's a really hard decision process. But then in general, other programs are not necessarily including it for a variety of reasons. And then those who have it are not necessarily looking at all parts of it. So it could be that they're really just interested in the writing part. Or it could be that they have a program that requires a statistics class and they want to see a strong math score in there. So it just really is program dependent. So I don't know about a national trend, but I can speak to like in this state. And part of the concern is if we're going to make students pay over $200 to take a test, is it worth it? Is it giving us the information that we need in order to predict their success and to say, yes, they'll be successful? And people are just beginning to question that and whether it's worth that value.
I will say that while there are some downsides to looking at test scores, there can also be some upsides, particularly if you're coming from a smaller school that may not have a big reputation. If you land a good standardized test score, it can really help open doors at more competitive programs. So it's worth a shot if you're looking around.
Yeah, I know there are also aren't there sub-testing fields, and some fields have testing fields, so you should be aware of that, of course. And like you just said, I think that my program really cared about the verbal and the writing score, right? The math score, I mean, we don't do cliometrics anymore in history. We abandoned that in the 1970s. It's gone. It's not something people do anymore. So I had a decent quant score, but nobody cared. So that's something to look into as well. Before you sort of begin studying and work really hard to sort of brush up on your algebra and geometry and whatnot, and then realize that the departments that you apply to don't really care about that at all. So
also just remember that it's a test and it's not the rest of your life. You're still a little baby when you're taking these tests, and you have so many years. You're in the 5th of your life, and there's so much more in front of you that you still have time.
Yeah, and the test doesn't reflect your worth or your intelligence, definitely. Some people aren't good test takers. I personally haven't had a math class in 3 years, so all of that I had to relearn, and it's those things that'll get you. So it's just a test, like Aisha said, and it's not the end of the world if you don't do that well. Mm-hmm.
I think it might tie into with some of the discussion in admissions too, where they were talking about they look at passion, and if you notice, nobody on this board talked, or the first panel talked about GRE scores being what they looked for in the application. That was the be all end all. It was things like passion or critical thinking, and those are personal attributes that you train in yourself. The test is just one thing; it's one part of your application. And that doesn't mean that it has to represent you as a whole. It's just one test.
The GRE can become, I was just going to say too, the GRE can become a positive experience too. I really do feel like the preparation that I had to do for the GRE, I had to really brush up on that algebra and the probability sections. And I use that all the time in my statistics courses like that I took in graduate school. And then also now I teach those courses. And I mean, algebra and probability are a big part of like the courses that I teach. And so my students are using that a lot. So you can kind of positively reframe it as this is not just preparation for the GRE per se, like it might also help you in graduate school. So.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much.
I'll let our experts introduce themselves. And if you would just make some sort of statement about your experience in grad school thus far, reflecting back, any hints that you want to give us just to start, that would be really good. Really good.
Do you want to just do introductions first and then go down the line of advice?
Yeah.
Okay, so hi, my name's Caitlin Trammell, and I went to UCA. I've only been gone a year. I was a double major in anthropology and history, and now I am a second-year grad student at the University of Kansas in museum studies.
Hi, I'm Brianna Wilbanks. I am also, we're all UCA grads, that's useless information. I was the first anthropology major to graduate from here, and I'm currently attending the University of Arkansas getting my master's degree in historical archaeology.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kara McGee. I just finished a PhD in sociology at Mizzou, and now I'm working at a publishing services company in St. Louis as something that they call a subject matter expert. So I had a really unique experience trying to translate my academic experience to the private sector, and I'll have some stuff to say about that later, and thanks for staying so late.
Hi, I'm Jamie Martinez, and when I was here at UCA, I was a psychology major, sociology minor. I'm currently at John Brown University, graduate student in clinical mental health counseling and marriage and family therapy. I love it, and so I'm excited to share my experience with you. Thank you for being here.
I'm Don Willis. I'm also a fresh PhD from Mizzou, and now assistant professor of sociology at University of Arkansas, Little Rock. I did my bachelor's in sociology here at UCA, my master's in sociology at UA Fayetteville, and then, of course, Mizzou for the PhD. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Did you say you wanted pieces of advice, or what do you give me criteria to start? Okay, so my number one thing that I would want to tell you is it will be okay, like both with admissions and also once you get to grad school and you have like your first semester. A lot of people have a really terrible time. If, for instance, like you have just moved to a new state, I moved to Kansas and had never been there before in my life, and it was awful. And I was like, this is terrible and I would like to go home. But all of the second years in my master's program were so calm. And so I asked them, how are you so calm? Are you not freaking out 100% of the time? Because that's what we're doing as first years. And they're like, no, you'll get there. It'll be fine. You have no reason to worry. And now I'm a second year, and I see the first years in my program going, oh my God, I want to cry and I want to go home and I want to quit. And I'm like, but you're going to be fine. And so it's weird to hear it echo back, but trust the people who tell you that you're going to be fine. You are allowed to freak out and you're allowed to be scared and to like drown your fears in chocolate and Netflix. So do it if you need it, but know that so many people before you have made it through grad school. Some people probably shouldn't have made it through grad school, but they did. You can do it. Like, you've got it. If you were here and if you have had like an education through UCA, I promise you your professors have prepared you in the correct way and you're going to be perfectly fine. So that's like my one piece of advice is don't be like me and freak out every 2 seconds of the day, because it's not worth it and you're going to look back on it in a year, especially on your admission stuff. Right now it feels so scary and it feels like the most dire thing in the world, but by the time you actually get to grad school, you're going to realize that it's all passable. Everything that you stressed about was not worth the stress. So just try and do yourself a favor and stay calm for now, and it'll do a lot for your mental well-being.
I think to echo that kind of advice is to just keep in mind that your mental health is more important than staying 16 hours a day in the lab for whatever, I don't know y'all's majors, but academia can really like push those who will forego social life, will forego personal life in order to just keep pumping out information to continuously work. But that's not what this is about. Graduate school should be for you to further your education, to engage with your cohort, to engage with the broader academic community, but you shouldn't push yourself to having to see a counselor every 2 weeks, because it's, not to say that there's anything wrong with seeing a counselor, that's probably actually good for your mental health, but it shouldn't drive you to bad behavior or anything like that just because people are pressuring you to behave in a certain way or to perform in a certain way, because ultimately you're going to, your work will speak for itself, if that makes sense. You don't necessarily have to push yourself to the brink in order to produce good work, and oftentimes it's not conducive to producing good work. So just keep that in mind. Netflix, chocolate, go out with your friends, have fun every once in a while, and don't think that just because you went home for a weekend that you're a bad graduate student. Because there are some professors who are like, oh, I can't believe you decided to go home instead of constantly working. That's not how it should be. And just keep that in mind. Keep in mind that a lot of departments are starting to be more conscientious of their graduate students' mental health and take advantage of any services available on the campuses that may be available to you. And don't stress. Y'all will do fine. Y'all are here, and like she said, UCA generally prepares you fairly well for what graduate school is going to be like.
Yeah, I think that you need to be ready. So we're not saying that it's going to be bad and it's going to drive you to destructive behavior, but you're going to have to be ready to self-care. Make that a thing. I think maybe sometimes part of undergrad, like self-care and social and, having fun and different events is a part of it. But in graduate school, workaholism can be, almost like a thing that seems to be aspired to, but it's not necessarily a good long-term strategy. Maybe you need to be a workaholic for a little while if you have like a pressing deadline or something, but it's not going to be a sustainable long-term strategy. Like if you're in a PhD program, I remember I had a professor here who said it to me. They said, I know you're capable, but I just hope you can find the energy to complete it. And I was like, what? I have so much energy. Oh, no, energy's fine. And then halfway through the program, I was like, I knew what he meant. How am I going to keep this fire going? So a statement that I heard that really stuck with me was, when you complete your undergrad, you think you know everything. When you get your master's, you think that you know nothing. And when you get your PhD, you find out that no one knows anything. And I wish that I would have heard that before I went to graduate school, because imposter syndrome is a real thing. I think that I still feel it. Definitely look up imposter syndrome and be ready to combat against that. Knowing what to expect. You're going to have to go in, protecting yourself and your mental health, because it's a really an elite undertaking. 25% of the adult population has their undergraduate degree. What's the numbers on grad school? It's very small. So you are doing an elitist thing that you're going to push yourself and need to prepare for. And so on imposter syndrome, you can't do it by yourself. Yes, it's for you to develop and all of this, but you have to reach out. That's what I think that was what was hard for me, was that I wasn't using the people around me as a resource. Older graduate students in your program, they can be some of the best mentors, because sometimes faculty, they've been out of the game so long, they aren't even familiar with the idiosyncrasies of the program, depending on what they have going on. So definitely older graduate students ahead of you as a resource. And you don't want to burn these bridges, because like Dawn and I just got out of the program and here we are. If Dawn and I had fights and stuff, this would be an awkward event. And so things will come up. Things will come up. Maybe you get along with someone scholarly really well, but socially you don't get along. I would say just let it go. There are going to be personal things that come up with people in your program, but they're going to be your future colleagues, or they're going to be reviewing your work, or they're going to be in a position to decide if you can. So make alliances, and fake it till you make it. If you have to be fake, be fake. Be pleasant and professional, for sure. And allies, have your allies. That is all.
I think that's great advice. I mean, making those connections is really, really important. For me, my experience was as a non-traditional student. So when I was in undergrad, I mean, I applaud you guys for being here. This is a great symposium. This is a lot of really, really helpful information that, if I were in your shoes back then, this would have really helped me to not be so afraid of the GRE, to have a little bit more confidence about the steps that I needed to take. And, we talked about self-care, mental health, taking care of yourself. One of the panelists up here earlier was talking about how you don't want to go into grad school at a time when you're not ready to. So if you don't feel this drive, like Dr. Lammers was saying, that fire in the belly, if you don't feel that, wait. Don't push yourself so hard to the point that you're going to make mistakes and say, this isn't me. This isn't what I want. It's really, really important to know the program that you're going into, why you're going into it, and what your professional goals are going to be. I worked, after I got my undergrad, I worked in social services. I worked for DHS. I experienced being a case manager. I knew that I was kind of, leaning toward working in a clinical setting, but I wasn't just, pushing myself to do it immediately after getting my bachelor's. So for me, the life experience that I had really tremendously helped me. It helped me to know kind of what my direction was. It motivated me. It made me really motivated to see, who do I need to talk to, and what do I need to learn, and how do these programs work, and what is the percentage rate of, graduates from this program, doing the things that we really set out to do in the beginning. As far as the program that I went into, it was really important for me to see what the pass rate was for the licensing exam, because I know I'm going to go into, licensed counseling. So those are the things that you really want to ask yourself, because if you're just doing it because it's you're going through the motions and you're like, well, everybody gets their undergrad and then they go to their master's. That's not the direction that you want to take. You want to be ready, because, it's really not something that you can just take lightly. The test is expensive. What you're going to go through emotionally and as far as stress and everything, all of that is just, it's really taxing. If you're not ready for it, don't push yourself to do it. Because when you are ready for it, it'll be wonderful. You will love it, because you know that that's what you're meant to be doing at that time. And that's really when you should be doing it.
Yeah, I think it's really great advice to, not feel like you have to rush into graduate school. I remember when I finished the bachelor's degree here, I was still kind of lukewarm on the idea of graduate school. And I didn't know, I guess maybe I just didn't want to get a job right away. I don't know. So, I took a year off and volunteered at Heifer Ranch, and that was a great experience. And it gave me some time to kind of not to use a ranch term, but kind of ruminate on, what kind of things were interesting to me, and why I really wanted to go to graduate school to begin with. Gave me time to really put a lot of thought in my personal statement and thinking about why I wanted to do that. So I think that's good advice. Trying to think of something new that I can add, and I think we've heard several people give the advice fake it till you make it, which I think when I heard the first person say that, thinking back on it, I think it is really important advice. But part of it is also learning what that means, because I do think, just like undergrad, there's a hidden curriculum to graduate school as well. So knowing how to fake it is what exactly are you faking? So I think one thing that personally took me some time to realize, this was part of what people were expecting in academia, what's something that's more impressive than coming into a classroom discussion or a study session and pretending like you you have all of the answers is having really, really good questions. And I think that it took me a long time to realize like that was the skill set that was most important that I was developing. And that was a skill set that a lot of professors wanted to see in graduate students, that if when you realize that too, it also takes some pressure off of you. Like faking it doesn't require you to be the most it takes a lot of intelligence to ask a question, but it also takes some humility. And so I think that's maybe the one piece of unique advice that I could give you. And my other points, I think, kind of echo other things that have been said. I think it's really the two most important things, looking back on my graduate experience, that I think kept my head above the water in times when I felt like I was really struggling, was I developed some really strong friendship networks in the program, like people that when I was freaking out, I called them, and when they were freaking out, they called me. And just being able to talk through some of that stuff with them, that was a really incredibly important, I think. And then equally important was just advisor match. And I don't know, I wish I could give you more advice on like how to select a good advisor, but in my experience, sometimes you get to select your advisor, and other times, as the admissions people pointed out, you're being accepted and you're kind of slotted for, they know like who you're going to be working with, because they know who has so many students already. And so I just think it's incredibly important that you foster that relationship really well if you can't select the person. But definitely go somewhere where you have at least 2 or 3 people whose work you know is interesting to you, that you know you could spend a significant portion of your life dedicating yourself to answering questions related to what they're interested in. But hopefully you'll get really lucky and your advisors will just be people that understand that you're human, which isn't always the case. I know that I don't remember who, someone earlier mentioned like, if you're thinking about having kids before you go into graduate school, you should know that. And you should know that. But I don't think, don't let it discourage you if you wanted to start a family and go into graduate school. I had 2 kids in graduate school. It didn't make graduate school easier, but it is doable. And if that's something that you thinking about, I do think it's an important thing when you go make a campus visit, is to ask around, like, are people, if that's your plan, of course, some people are not, it's not an issue, but I knew coming in married that my wife and I, we were planning, and so it was a question that I had for people when I came to my program, and at the time there weren't many other parents in the program that I remember, but then all of a sudden everyone was having kids. Showed it could be done. Yeah. Once, and I think there's this general anxiety about like whether that's possible or not. And I'm just, if you're the person that doesn't want to postpone, if you're planning on parenthood and you don't want to postpone it, it is possible. And I think it's important, though, it's not a conversation you should have to have with your advisor, but I do remember, and I had a really incredible advisor, and I said, I just sat down and said, Joan, do you think this is going to like completely derail me? And she said, absolutely not. If this is your family planning, it should be up to you and your wife. And so it's telling, I think, that I felt I even had to talk to my advisor about it. But I do think if that's you want to end up somewhere where you feel like there is a faculty and a department culture that is welcoming to that, because it is not the case in every graduate program that there would be supportive of that. So that's something to be thinking about. I've probably gone longer than I need. too. So.
You're fine. No, it's
I was about to say, you guys ask questions because the professors are gone except for Doug, and he's cool. So, like, ask questions that you normally wouldn't want to ask your professor because we'll tell you. Like, what do you want to know?
So, like, if you feel like you need to take some time off, my greatest fear is, like, how that affects recommendation letters. You know, so I feel like I have to do it now because I'm here with the professors and, like, getting recommendations and knowing them and stuff. And then it's like, if you take time off, you just, like, walk back and ask for letters and, you know, how should you do that?
Yeah. Speaking to that, I want to say, let's see, I graduated in 2012. I went to grad school in 2016. Doug was he was my favorite professor. We remained in contact, but, you know, of course, it was a period of time that I wasn't here. In my experience, my work environment became extremely helpful because I don't think that I would have had such a great experience with gathering recommendation letters or having people who really knew my character. If I hadn't had that work experience, like the director of my division wrote a letter for me. I had a coworker who was also in the same program, so I was able to kind of see what they were all about. And, she knew me professionally and she was a student there. So it was like, actually it added to my ability to shine. Because not only did I have experience as a student, so I had an academic side that I could showcase, and then I also had my professional side. And so really when the programs are looking at, what you want to do down the line professionally, what you're interested in, what experience you have, all that stuff really does actually help you. Now, does that mean that you should not keep in touch with your professors? No. You should email. You should visit. You should, stay connected, because the more connected you are, the better it is going to be for you. But don't rule out those professional contacts as well. Whatever you're doing work-wise, internship-wise, volunteer, work that you might be doing, all of those professional contacts that you make in the field that you're really passionate about are also really, really valuable for your application.
Yeah, like the person who was my supervisor for my internship, they wrote one of my main recommendation letters, and my other recommendation letters I kind of switched around depending on which program I was talking to, because some of my professors had better experiences with me relating to a thing that related to that specific program, but my internship advisor was the one who I used for every single one, because whenever you're in class, like, you have a certain amount of dedication that you have to do to get your grade, but whenever you're working, and especially if you're working for pay, you're like, the fact that you show up, the fact that you don't call in sick all the time, the fact that whenever you're there you pay attention, you're doing really good work, like, those are the things that grad school is a full-time job. Like, that's going to be what really shines, is the fact that you didn't just quit, or that you made sure that you showed up every day. And that's another thing, if you still have some time, or if you're going to take a time off, do an internship, volunteer somewhere, like, get the actual practical experience of doing something related to your field, because that's something that's going to set you apart from other people who just got really good grades. Because getting good grades, you guys have done that. Tons of people here at UCA have wonderful GPAs. A lot of people who apply to grad school have wonderful GPAs. But if you have more real life, everything you're doing is real life, but if you have more like in the field experience through an internship or through volunteering your time, they're going to say, oh, so they know, and it's going to really make you stand out from everyone else.
And it can especially affect the way that, or the opportunities you may get post further graduate study degrees, whatever. If you have a master's degree or a PhD, and I'm speaking from experience as an archaeologist, going into the public, so like doing CRM work after getting your master's degree before you might decide to go to get your PhD, because not everybody who gets a PhD is going to get an academic job or even wants to get an academic job. But if you have spent your entire academic career mostly in the academy but not applying your actual skills or abilities in a way that is marketable, you're less likely to get jobs. So like if you get a PhD in archaeology, but you've had one field school and you've never ran your excavation, you've never been in charge of a massive undertaking, and you decide, oh, I want to be a CRM archaeologist, you're less likely to have the ability to get those jobs because you haven't been able to demonstrate through your time period in the academy that you can actually do the on-the-ground work. And I'm sure that can be applied to other fields other than just archaeology. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes time off, doing a job that's more maybe with the public or hands-on that you can apply your degree to can be to your benefit later down the road.
I would say also if you're really motivated by money, you know, some people have this idea they want a lot of security and they want a really high salary. I don't necessarily know that a graduate education is the way to that, especially depending on the field. And so you need to decide, you know, of course we all have passions and everything, but if you have your passions but you're also like, oh, well, I need to be secure financially so I'm going to go to graduate school, I don't necessarily know if that is the best line of thinking because there's a lot of people that come out of their undergraduate and have comparable salaries to, you know, tenured professors. So if your goal is money or your goal is financial security or being a success in some sort of capacity and that's related to like monetary or professional things, I really don't know if graduate school is for you. That's like what's important about this fire in the belly thing. Why would you put yourself through this? I think we've really been sugarcoating it, but why would you put yourself through this? And so it needs to be a specific yearning. You know, personally, I had questions that needed to be answered. You know, Doug answered all that he could for me in my short time in undergrad about, you know, what sociology had to explain about the world, but I still had these burning questions, and I went to graduate school and I found out. And that's how I survived is there was always something that I wanted to find out or there was something that I figured out, and that gave me peace. Mm-hmm. So the graduate school experience didn't give me peace, and academia doesn't necessarily give me peace, but darn it, sociology does and did. Yeah. So, woo! Yeah, so if you want to make a lot of money, maybe don't do what we did. I don't know. I don't need to speak for y'all. Maybe y'all are rolling.
Although I will say, this is something that I've had to talk about at my job. I work at an art museum that's on campus, and so I don't teach classes like a graduate assistant. I have a working internship because I'm in museum studies, so I need to work at a museum. And something we keep talking about is, yes, this is your passion. That's why you should go to graduate school, is because you're passionate about it. But a lot of people get worked into corners at their jobs where, because this is your passion, you're expected to work more than your 40 hours because you care about it. Get paid for the work you do. Like, you can come in extra if you have a special project or something, but get paid. Like, just because you're being told that, oh, well, this is how every other generation has done it because you're passionate about it, you should be able to work those extra hours whether you're getting paid or not. Say no. Feel free to say no or to speak up that you don't feel like you're getting value for that time, because your time is worth it, especially if you have gotten your degrees. If you've gone to a PhD or to a master's and you've put in that time, get paid, because there are other people who are not going to do the work that you do because they weren't passionate about it. So passion doesn't mean free labor. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise. It's not worth it. Also, real fast, set a bedtime for yourself while you're in grad school, because you deserve it and you will not function elsewhere. If sleep is your solace, sleep. If going to the gym helps you feel better, set a time to do that. If you just need an hour of Netflix, set a time to do that. Passion does not mean it runs your life.
That's all well and good, but there's X amount of work that you'll have to do. X amount of stuff that people will expect that you get done, all right? And so panelists like Dawn started to do family, which is just like an amazing thing. I'm not sure how you did it.
I had a baby when I was in Doug's class. When I came here to UCA, I was transferring from another school. My baby was 4 months old when I started.
Super hard. So if you all could talk about your significant others or significant close friends, I found that always kind of a difficult thing to do, to try to get it across to them effectively. I love you, you're great, and you're wonderful, but I've got crap to do.
Yeah.
So how do
So, do you want to go down the line?
Yeah, you go ahead.
My boyfriend moved in second year, so he just moved in. And so we were long distance for a full year. And that actually worked out really well because we did here's the set aside like time that I'll Skype you. Other than that, I got homework. But remind them, like if you have someone living with you, that they have things that they like to do and they should do that while you're doing homework. So for instance, he gets home from his job, I get home from my either working or from class around the same time. We have dinner, that's our time to be together, and then I do my homework. He goes and plays video games, and we're in separate rooms, and it's great. So especially when you live together with somebody, you don't have to be together 100% of the time. You can be in the room and be quiet, and it works really well. And also, if they're bugging you, just tell them to go sit quietly just to help you. Set aside date nights if that's what's going to work. But if the person you're with is not being as understanding, feel free to explain in a calm voice, but a firm voice, that you need them to just shush. And if they love you, they'll understand.
I have the experience of my fiance is actually getting his PhD in 6 states away. So we're long distance and also both getting the higher education at the same time. So we're very understanding already of hey, love you, can this be a 10-minute phone date? Because I'm exhausted and I really need to go to bed. And it's I got you, because they are understanding. And to kind of add on to having a significant other in graduate school, did you guys read that Time article that was 45% of graduate students' marriages end in disaster or something like that? There was a recent Time article that came out that was basically people are, I believe that the first panelist was talking about how there's affairs during graduate school or it ends marriages and stuff like that. That's not an end all be all. Don't look at those numbers and look at your SO and be they're going to be gone in 2 years and I love them so much and I'm really sad and it's awful. That's not necessarily going to be the case, because I've been engaged to this dude for 3 years. We're still going pretty strong. The wedding's in May, and you just have to make sure that you make time for the significant other. If you guys like watching scary movies on Netflix, do a movie night while you're on the phone and ooh, pause it please, I need to go to get something. There are ways to make, if you have to do long distance, to make it work. If you can move in together and you do the whole go in a different room, that's awesome. But don't make, I believe the wording in the Time article was something along the lines of, don't make your relationship collateral for having a graduate degree. Because I believe what I was trying to say with my advice is basically, graduate school is awesome, and it does answer a lot of questions. It does a lot of amazing things for you. But if you have a loved one, remember that they're there too. They're going to need at least a dash of attention every once in a while, and just try to find a good balance, and it'll work out. Don't be scared of people being oh, people in academia, their relationships never work out. That's not true.
I disagree with that premise just on principle, because let me subject to you that if graduate school can undo your relationship, you had a problem in your relationship before graduate school entered. So don't think graduate school is going to ruin your great relationship. It won't.
Yeah, graduate school won't ruin it. You will. It's fine.
Exactly.
It's fine.
On that note, I can't really speak to human relationships. You don't want to hear that from me. Keep trying. It's confusing. I don't know. Sometimes you have a difficult personality. But my dog, so I got my dog like my senior year of undergrad,
And, you know, there were times when I would get into workaholism, and she was the only thing that would get me outside. You know, the dog forced me to take an hour a day to be outside, you know, rain, sleet, or snow. She got to go. I can't just, you know, leave this huge dog cooped up in an apartment. And so that was one way that I set myself up for success. If I was ever struggling, you know, the dog was really there for me. So my recommendation is, if you've been waiting on getting a pet and undergrad wasn't the time, grad school is the time for your pet.
Man, like as far as relationships go, I think it's been a real whirlwind for me. I got married really early. Don't do that. Okay. I've been married for 11 years. And when I was in grad school, or when I was in my undergrad, it was difficult because I was commuting and I had a baby, new marriage, stepdaughter every weekend. Like, I to this day feel like it was a miracle that I graduated. But now that I'm a graduate student, you know, my son's 9, my stepdaughter, she's 17. Wow. I have found that, I've discovered a lot about myself in my experience as a graduate student. I did wait because I was worried about, was I really going to be able to put forth the energy that this deserved and that I deserve, because this is my endeavor, because this is my future, because this is what I'm passionate about, and I don't want to mess it up, right? So, all the relationships around me, if you're close to me, this is my life. Do not fight with me right now. I have a paper to write. Like, I need to be in class at this time. I need to get this much sleep. And then also working at the same time, So I think that as far as relationships, if the person that you're with loves you and understands that this is what's important to you, they will support you. But it's really important to communicate the value of what you're doing. And it's really important to communicate ahead of time before, let's say, I was really bad about procrastinating as an undergrad. Now, as soon as I get that syllabus, I'm like, whoa, all right, I'm going to write down on this calendar, I need to start on this paper by this date. I need to have this research done by this time. And it really helps because then I can say to my husband, don't talk to me this week because I'm working on this, And it's kind of like you get into a rhythm where you say, this is what I need to do. And he already knows, your significant other or whoever you're close to, they already know what you need to do. And so it's not a mystery, or they don't get their feelings hurt whenever they want to hang out with you. And you're like, no, I got a test, no, I got a project I'm working on. So they're in the loop, share that syllabus. You know what I mean? Put it on your Outlook calendar. Do something where they're not in the dark about your endeavors. Because I think that if they are that close to you, and if it's a family member or somebody who's going to be with you on your journey through graduate school, they deserve to know about your life. And that may be the only thing that you can share about your life at that time, because that's where your brain's at. That's where your energy is at, So don't make it a secret, plan ahead. Have conversations on the front end so that when crunch time comes, you're not facing divorce or breakup or a mental breakdown, And if you have kids, play with them at least 5 minutes every single day. I have a 9-year-old. Read to them, love them, because those years are precious, even if you are a graduate student. So there's a way to work around it, but you got to be a planner, you got to be a communicator, and you got to be really upfront, and do not be afraid to say no, or don't be afraid to say, this is what I need. Like self-care down the line, I think we all are really saying that's super important, super, super important. But your relationships, that speaks directly to that. So they're connected, really, really deeply connected. And, don't go it alone, but don't be so dependent either. Find that balance and communicate 100%.
Yeah, it's constantly a battle figuring out how to balance life and work, and that's something that's going to exist regardless of whether you go to graduate school, I think. So maybe it's heightened or more intense in graduate school, Someone when I was in my master's degree in the pro-sim class, let's put it this way, like both academia or grad school and your family are greedy institutions, and they will take up as much of your time that you will give them. And I think that's really true. I mean, if I had not, really scheduled some work time, especially on the latter end of the program, it just wouldn't have got done. But I was really lucky that I had a supportive partner, and once I had kids, I can't say they helped in terms of self-care and sleep and all of that, but they did help me. Like, they actually were a huge motivator. Actually,
Yes.
Just I don't know. It just made me more efficient with my time. I was much more productive during my actual work hours than before my first son was born. I would go and I would spend a lot of time reading, which you need to do. But at some point you have to write.
Yeah.
And, like having my boys really helped me set a really hard schedule for myself in terms of being productive in writing the dissertation, because all of a sudden life just felt a lot scarier, and I was just like, no, this has to be done. This is the date when my funding runs out, and made me. I was serious about it before, but I think it scared me a little bit about the deadline of getting things done on time. So, and my spouse as well, she was this way before we had kids even. If I was going to be spending time away from her, I better get shit done. And I would get daily texts from her. And so, yeah, that's in my acknowledgments of my dissertation, with the daily text to get shit done from my wife, because, she didn't want me wasting my time. If I wasn't going to be productive when I was away from her, then I better be at the house doing something with the kids, or, it just, it made me a lot more conscious of my time use and time management. But I do think it took some time for me to communicate why I needed so much time. In graduate school, most of your projects are so long out that at the end of the day, you can't come home to your partner and be like, I achieved X, Y, Z, right? You might have just done you just might have been searching literature all day.
Yeah.
And you read maybe some of it, and so it's really hard to come home with tangible things and say, I did these things. And communicating the long-term nature of the projects you're working on, I think helps them also understand that at the end of your day, you're not going to be able to say, this is what I achieved, because a lot of it is intangibles. And I think once they get that, then there's also more understanding on their part of why you need a 4-hour block to just read.
Yeah.
So I think that, talking about being really good at communicating what you need to be successful in your program, I think that was one of the really key things for me and my spouse, was just finding, and I don't know if I ever really achieved this, but finding a way to try and communicate that nature of the work that you do, because that's something really unique to graduate school, I think, and academia. So.
I have one thing that I remembered that I wanted to add to this. If y'all go to conferences, archival trips, or if you're an archaeologist and you do some other type of field work, if your spouse can, take them on and let it be a vacation. because my dude is going to history conferences, and I'm like, I have nothing, it's winter break. And then we end up going to Charleston. Or this summer, I dug in England, and I was just like, come over. And we did, and we went to England together. So, like, make time for each other. And if you have the ability, if you're like, say you have work days, or they have work days that are coming up to where they can take off, and you're like, I have a conference in Washington, D.C. on the 25th. And they're like, oh, I can take off work for that day, and we can all go together. And when we're done with the or when you're done like interacting with everyone at the conference, we can go see the sites or stuff like that. Just it doesn't have to be all work and like worried about scheduling and stuff like that. There are fun moments of graduate school where you're like, I got conference funding.
You're sharing what you love, you know, and you're planning it ahead of time because it means something to you. It matters. I think that it's awesome that you got to do that, and you got to take something academic and professional and something, you know, in terms of your work and share it with your significant other. I think that a lot of, you know, and I think you're right. You know, it's hard to always say exactly what you need. Sometimes you just need to be like, I just need a little bit of space to figure out what I got to do, plan my week or plan my day. Sometimes it literally feels like hour by hour. I'm like, okay, I'm exhausted right now. But I think that experience when your significant other or whoever you're close to, when they see you going through that and they can say, oh man, you're working so hard, you know, I want you to succeed. It makes it all the more rewarding because, I mean, this is a passion. You do not go into grad school or you don't take this route if you're not really, really, really into it. If it's not something that, like you were saying earlier about feeling kind of called to do it, you know. I think generally speaking, there's like a typical path that you could study if you wanted to look at any career, right? So if you're looking at something that you know you kind of see yourself doing, like typically, I mean, for me, like I'm in mental health. So, you know, a lot of the people that are in my field, we have similar jobs, you know, or we may work for, you know, there's a variety of different areas that we can work in. But in terms of just the experience that a lot of other professional counselors are going to get, we have a lot of things that are in common. Like your peers in the program who are going through the same thing that you're going through, they're very valuable as well. I mean, my director of my program, he was saying that, you know, he was just openly like, you will never read every single word that you have been assigned in graduate school. So just get over that. Yeah. He was like, you're going to be exhausted. Life is going to happen. You know, if you guys have kids, you're working full time, you know, some of you working more than one job, you might get sick. Your parents might get sick. You know, things happen, and there's going to be a lot of times where you're not going to finish, you know, reading everything that you were assigned. And I think that, you know, that speaks to, like, even in undergrad, when I was an undergrad and I had a family and I was commuting and I was a non-traditional student, there were times where I really had to be like, okay, what's the most important thing I need to get out of this reading right now so that I can be prepared? Mm-hmm. And you kind of learn how to prioritize like that, and don't beat yourself up when you're not perfect, you know? He also actually made a suggestion about having great study groups, because if you have other peers who are reading the same thing, you know, if you know that week you're not going to be able to get to all those chapters, maybe like one of your peers can read 2, and then you could read 2, and then you guys can come together and you take notes, and you're just like, okay, like, let's pump each other with information, you know? And that's okay, you know? Leaning on other people who are in the program with you is also a really smart way to get through it, because, you know, like we were saying, if you isolate yourself too much, you don't get enough sleep, you put too much pressure on yourself, you know, it's not going to be pretty.
That's something you can gauge on a campus visit, too.
Yes.
It's a good question to ask, like, what sorts of things do the graduate students do in their free time? Like,
how do you survive?
I remember, like, one of the selling points, is going to sound silly, going to Mizzou, was I knew they had a softball team, and they went out and did fun stuff. Which I think, did you get the softball team started? Founding.
Thank you for the credit. Yes, we were called the Social Deviants.
But when I was like messaging Kara about like what the program was like, you know, she was like, we have fun, we do things. People are really invested and passionate about the program, but we can also talk about not sociology, you know, so that was a really big bonus for me that I was looking for in a program, because my master's program at U of A was great. I got an excellent education there, but most of the people, you know, we didn't hang out that much, and I don't know why that was. There just wasn't a culture of it in that department. Some of us did, but not to the same degree as at Mizzou. Maybe it was, I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much about why. But it made it feel way lonelier. It made it feel like a way lonelier experience. I had a great advisor there, and I was lucky for that. And my spouse was living 2 hours away at the same time, so that may have been it as well. But, you know, that's something you can kind of gauge on a campus visit, and it's another thing to like think about, kind of a not what you're typically told to look at when you're looking at programs, but just what is the department culture like, and you can ask those sorts of questions. So if you're both the professors and the graduate students, I don't think they'd think it was weird at all. But we had like a social hour once a week, and we had softball. So, yeah.
Also, like in regards to significant others, but also your cohort, remember that you're not the only person who has a life. So like ask your significant other what they're doing at work or how they are. Call your mom. Lord, call your mom, call your dad, call your grandmother, call your sister, your brother, anyone, and just ask them how they are or what they're doing. Ask your cohort how they are, because sometimes you're so caught up in your own head that you have a problem and you forget that other people around you also still are having stresses in daily lives. And so sometimes hearing other people talk about stuff completely reminds you that your stuff isn't that bad or it's livable. And it also like, just remember that even though you might be away from your family's still there. And so your mom would love for you to ask her how her day was. It would probably make her life. So just like call someone up that you haven't talked to on the phone in a while and ask them how they are, because you need that human connection reminder. Otherwise you're going to lose your mind.
Getting close. But one quick question. This is a question close to my heart. So, real fast, and you all don't have to speak to this, but how important do you think undergraduate research experience is as you think about it?
100%. Extremely
I wouldn't have
important.
been accepted without it, for sure not.
It's also where you find out what you're passionate about, because I had no idea that I would even want to go to grad school, and then I did my anthropology seminar, and I found out that there was a huge issue in museums that have to do with how like Native American people are treated by museums. And I was like, that's it. That's what I'm doing for the rest of my life. Here's the thing. And so you can find the rest of your life in your research.
Yeah. Dr. McKinnon dumped a bucket of glass on a table in front of me, and that's how I discovered I wanted to do medical archaeology. And that can happen. But also, don't be scared if during undergraduate and you're trying to go to graduate school that you still don't know what your specific focus is. Because I have an advisor, and he can attest to this. He went into undergraduate with a specific focus, master's in prehistoric archaeology, and then got his PhD in historical archaeology, which are completely different fields. And he's successful at both. He's able to understand both. So don't think that just because one thing, as we're using here, gets you passionate or lights the fire in your belly or what have you. If you don't immediately have that, don't be scared, but also don't be afraid to venture into new things. As you're developing your understanding of the literature within your major field, you're gonna find like one article and you read that, and it has not really a whole lot to do with your major interest that you already have kind of chosen, but you read it and you're like, this is amazing. I have to learn more about this. I have to have this as a side project. Also, side projects are awesome. Also, so are hobbies. Try to keep those in mind, because when you're writing your master's thesis or your dissertation, you get tunnel vision for that thing. and you can get trapped in your own mind while you're trying to think about it and getting lost in all the literature and trying to answer these questions and what have you. So having side passions that you're like, oh, when I finish my dissertation, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to be interested in doing this. Also, hobbies, embroidery, sewing, other hobbies, insert there. Those are also really good to try to distract you from working 16 hours in the lab trying to get your dissertation done, if that makes sense.
I think I had a love-hate relationship with research as an undergraduate, but I think the thing that really stood out to me as far as research goes is there's so much, right? And depending on what field you're in or what you're really interested in, what becomes really fun as far as research, or what becomes really helpful, is that the more you dig into it and the more you read and the more you start writing about the topic that you're interested in, or something that has to do with whatever you're assigned in your field or in your program, you're going to see what's out there. So you're going to see like, oh wow, there's really not a lot of research in this particular area, and I think this is really interesting, and this is really important that we find out more information about this. And so it kind of sparks this very creative, independent way of thinking, because you're saying, okay, this is what the field already has to offer. What can I put into this, or what do I think, as a professional person or a person in this program, what do I think is important to add to our plethora of knowledge? Because the more we have out there, the better, in terms of making changes in our fields and doing things to improve education, doing things to improve programs, and trying to change the world, so to speak, because we all kind of have that fire to do that, right? But if you don't know what's been done, and you don't know how to kind of branch off of that, or maybe replicate studies, or kind of see what is a really important area to delve into even more, then what can you really contribute? And then how comfortable are you going to be whenever you're writing those gigantic papers and you're like, man, I just feel like this is not what I want to be doing. If you don't feel like you're comfortable doing research, grad school's not for you, right? I mean, I kind of feel like we can't really get away from the fact that academic research is extremely important. So like, get a relationship with it, feel it out and see, what is it about research that maybe you struggle with. Try to not let it be this daunting thing. I think it used to be really daunting for me. I think it used to be something where I felt like I didn't really you would look at the jargon, or you would look at like what does this even mean? You would read an abstract and think, what does this mean in like English, like common plain English? What did they do? And I think that when you get really comfortable with research, then you actually start to grow as a professional, because then you start seeing what more needs to be done. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if I kind of bungled that. But.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. And you touched on something, and like it reminded me that I think the fundamental distinction between undergraduate education and graduate education is the shift from sort of being able to consume and retain knowledge to being able to contribute and produce knowledge. And so it's sort of like your test run. If you can get involved in that at an undergraduate level, you can, you're learning some of the practical aspects of research, which is really important. Oftentimes way more important than we think it's going to be, just like the logistics of doing research. But, also kind of gives you an idea of how exciting you find research. It turned out, for me, I initially just thought like academia sounded fun because I like my teachers, they're cool, and we talk about interesting ideas. But it wasn't, it wasn't until I got a little bit of a taste of research that I really realized that it was really exciting to me that there could be answers, there could be questions that people hadn't answered in the same way that I could figure out how to answer it, and that I could be creative in the way that I answered the question. So people might have thought, like people may have answered the same question but answered it in a different way, and so, you know, that was the exciting thing for me, was like people are always coming up with new ways of answering questions that give you new insights, and you know, I love hearing about. So just to give an example, like there's an economist at UA Little Rock, and she was looking at trying to find like you know, whether or not she was thinking of new research methods to figure out whether there was racial bias in policing. And the place that she was doing her PhD at, they just so happened to have, you know, like put in place these vans. So not the cameras that ticket you, because that's different, because driving behaviors change at intersections than at other places. Anyways, so she was able to basically do like a man versus machine sort of thing. Like, if we take the tickets given by these police vans and use that as sort of like the baseline, that the police van shouldn't, you know, technically have any racial bias, and match that up to the ticketing that is going on among police officers, can find it different. It was a totally new way, because in the past, you know, we could just see, okay, there's a discrepancy. But then people would always like call that research into question, like, well, maybe if is there a difference at night? Because then you could say that there is no racial bias, right? And so there was another economist in Columbia that was like trying to call into question some of the findings on the police department's racial bias there. But this new research method totally blew his argument out of the water, because it shows, yeah, if you compare the two, it's very clear that there is a racial bias. So it's just like, that took really creative and innovative thinking to answer a question that people had thought they had answered in the past. And so I get really nerdy and excited about research methods. And so, but I think that's something that academia can offer that a lot of other professions cannot, is that you're not just, it's not just like your labor time that you know, people are valuing you for your ability to think and be critical. And that's, I think, a pretty unique thing in a lot of, in job market as a whole. So I think undergraduate experience is extremely valuable. If you can do it, go to the ASAA if you can. I went to that conference as an undergraduate, presented some undergraduate research on something about gender in popular magazines. I did a content analysis of magazines, yeah. Anyways, and I'll be there this Friday as a, yeah.